There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Igo moves to amend Senate File Number 972, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A12.
The member from Itasca, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I guess I want to start this off by saying I think all of us are here because we want to bring our best days to reality, right? And in any kind of legislation that we pass, any kind of legislation that we move, we want to do that. So this energy and climate omnibus bill does a lot of things that are going to change demand in our world. Lots of emphasis on solar panels, lots of emphasis on wind power, wind turbines. And I just want to talk about what that's going to do to our global supply. So if we increase the demand for these devices, we're going to increase the demand for cobalt, nickel, iron, and copper. And that's great, right? We're going to see that demand add jobs and add infrastructure, right? But we're not going to add it here. Instead, we're going to add that around the world. We're going to add that in Africa, specifically the Congo. We're going to add that in China. We're going to add that in Indonesia. And by doing that, we are going to increase this demand by places that have little to no labor standards, little to no environmental concerns, and we are going to enslave more people and put more pollutants into our atmosphere. But we're not done there. Once we get those minerals out of the ground around the world, those critical minerals, they're going to go on ships. Ships that come across the ocean that dump pollutants and CO2 into our atmosphere at a rate that's higher than any of these coal plants that we seem to argue about all the time in committee. So once they get here to the United States, then we'll start using them. But I offer a different solution. That's what this amendment does here today. This amendment would create and make Minnesota a mining-friendly state. We have hundreds of tons of copper, nickel, and other critical minerals located right beneath our feet here in Minnesota. Did you know that the United States as a whole imports, and we're only reliable, I should say this, we're reliable on only 36% of our own stores for copper, only 48% for nickel, and that's with recycling. So that means the rest of it's coming across the shores. Right here I have a graph in front of me that by the year 2030, just because of electric vehicles, we are going to see a 14% increase in demand for nickel, 13% for iron, and 10% for copper, and I could go on and on. So members, I ask us all today to add this to the bill because Minnesota needs to be a mining-friendly state so we can unlock the resources that we have right beneath our feet. We can give good-paying jobs to Minnesotans that support a family wage. We can put the northeastern Minnesota back to work. And when those revenues come, we are going to add billions to the school trust fund. That's money for our students. We are going to have increased tax revenues. That's tax cuts for Minnesotans, everybody. These are the things we can do if we unlock our potential. Let's be leaders here in Minnesota. Let's make Minnesota a mining-friendly state. Let's bring our best days to reality. I would encourage a yes vote, and I'm going to ask for a roll call.
Representative Igo requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Long.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
State your point of order.
Madam Speaker, under Rule 3.21, this is not germane because it introduces a new topic. There is not mining in the underlying bill, and this is a subject is mining.
I find the point of order well taken.
Madam Speaker, I'd appeal the ruling of the Speaker and request a roll call vote.
Representative Igo requests an appeal of the Speaker's ruling and requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Igo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I would encourage us to add this to the bill. This policy that we're enacting is going to increase the demand for critical minerals. Hence, we need to add this legislation to make Minnesota a mining-friendly state to the bill. There is consequences to this legislation. We could go on and on about that. I don't want to emphasize there. I want to emphasize on the fact that we can be leaders right here, right now, today. Please vote red. Let's remove this, and then let's add this legislation to the bill. We can unlock these critical minerals, build our infrastructure here, put Minnesotans to work, and help everyone and be leaders around the world. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the appeal ruling? Doesn't look like it. The clerk will take the roll on the motion to appeal the ruling of the Speaker. Members voting remotely, please vote. Will the clerk please call the names of those members who have not voted yet?
Dave? Bliss. Bliss.
Bliss, no.
Bliss, no. Bo.
Oh, no.
Bo, no. Daniels.
Daniels, no.
Daniels, no. Davids.
David's votes no.
Davids, no. Frankie. Frankie, no. Greenman.
Greenman, aye.
Greenman, aye. Hamilton.
Hamilton, no.
Hamilton, no. Houseman.
Houseman, aye.
Houseman, aye. Heinrich.
Heinrich, no.
Heinrich, no. Keel. Keel, no. Lee.
Lee, aye.
Lee, aye. Mariani. Mariani. Mason.
Aye.
Mason, aye. McDonald.
McDonald, aye. No.
McDonald, no. New Brindley.
New Brindley, no.
New Brindley, no. Thompson.
Thompson, aye.
Thompson, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 70 ayes and 63 nays, it is the decision of the House that the ruling of the Speaker shall stand. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Igo moves to amend Senate File Number 972, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A23.
Representative Igo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So this amendment is a very simple amendment that is going to be to adopt that the policy of the state is to support the health and expansion of the state's logging industry. And I just want to talk about why that's so important. My district has been a logging district for a long time. I've lived in the shadow of a paper mill my entire life, and I just know how important that is to the livelihoods of every one of my constituents. So what this amendment would really do is talk more further about how a healthy logging industry in the state of Minnesota is actually good for our environment. Right? A young, healthy forest is one of the best ways to sequester carbon from our atmosphere. So if we have a healthy logging industry and we are providing wood products, it means we're cutting forests down, we're planting new forests, we're taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. That wood that we're cutting down, we're turning into wood products, which are then building our homes. And members, it's no surprise that we're talking about how we have a housing problem here in the state of Minnesota. It's already been talked about here on the House floor, how expensive material prices are. So by increasing and saying that the state of Minnesota's job is to increase a healthy logging industry, so take that wood out of our forest, healthy forest management that keep forest fires from happening, we can do the right thing here. And this is the right move if we want to take care of our environment, of our climate. Healthy forests take out CO2, and then we sequester it. Every one of these desks that we sit in front of is sequestered carbon that is not in our atmosphere. That is what this amendment does. Members, first off, I'd like to request a roll call.
Representative Igo requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Igo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I hope we can all vote green on this today so that we can add this initiative to our state policy so that we can have a healthy logging industry and in turn, healthy forests, which in turn will make a healthy environment. Thank you.
Representative Long.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
State your point of order.
Under Rule 3.21, this is not germane because logging is not a subject in the underlying bill.
I find the point of order well taken.
Madam Speaker, I'd move to appeal the ruling of the Speaker and request a roll call vote.
Representative Doubt moves to appeal the ruling of the Speaker and requests a roll call. Discussion to the appeal. Representative Igo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, once again, Again, the policy that we're creating in this omnibus bill is going to affect our logging industry, right? We could go into how energy costs are going to potentially drive our loggers out of business. We need to have a healthy logging industry. If not, we're going to see what happens on the West Coast. We're going to see forests that go up in flames that burn up entire portions of our country. And instead of sequestering the carbon, instead of putting hardworking people to work and increasing our economy, and I could go on, that's all burnt, that CO2 goes into the atmosphere, and that's making a further problem for all of us. I would hope that we can appeal this ruling of the Speaker, and we can add this to the bill because this is very important. And this will be effective based on what's in this omnibus bill. Thank you.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I would encourage members and advice to the body to support the IGO motion. Representative IGO, you are a freshman, and I am very happy to have you on the School Trust Lands Commission with us this time. If you can exert half of the fire that you've got in your belly for school trust lands issues when we get involved in the commission, the kids in the state of Minnesota are going to do well. We should have taken your last amendment, and we should be taking this amendment as well. Just a quick history lesson for you folks. You have a constitutional fiduciary obligation to manage the school trust lands in a way that produces revenue for the kids here in the state of Minnesota. And maybe someday we'll have a more robust conversation on that. But again, you do have a fiduciary obligation. And thank you, Representative Igo, for bringing this forward and giving me the opportunity to underscore the important work that you are attempting to do here today. Again, I would ask you to support the IGO motion, members. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members voting remotely, please vote. Will the clerk please call the names of those members who have not voted yet?
Bliss.
Bliss, no.
Bliss, no. Bo.
Oh, no.
Bo, no. Davids.
Davids votes no.
Davids, no. Greenman.
Greenman, aye.
Greenman, aye. Hamilton.
Hamilton, no.
Hamilton, no. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Heinrich.
Heinrich, no.
Heinrich, no. Keel. Keel, no. Lee.
Lee, aye.
Lee, aye. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. McDonald.
McDonald, no.
McDonald, no. Thompson.
Thompson, aye.
Thompson, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 70 ayes and 64 nays, it is the judgment of the House that the decision of the Speaker shall stand. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Igo moves to amend Senate File Number 972, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A21.
Representative Igo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So yeah, this is the summation of all of my support for mining and logging on the Iron Range. This last little addition would add to the bill that there cannot be, and we need to take into effect that there can be no damage or harm that would befall our mining or logging industry in northeastern Minnesota. And I talk about that because my power producer up north is Minnesota Power. And it's worth noting that Minnesota Power, that heavy industry, makes up 74% of their baseload power. So if we create policy that's going to essentially tax our heavy industry out of being able to function due to having rising energy costs, that'll fall back on the consumers, also known as the constituents of northeastern Minnesota and my district of 5B. So I'm hoping this will be seen as a friendly amendment that we can add that when we're considering policy on this omnibus bill as we go into conference, that we think about how it's going to affect those in northeastern Minnesota, and that it is a fragile ecosystem, that the energy in northeastern Minnesota. And I believe there is an amendment to the amendment. So if we want to hear that, I guess. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Stephenson moves to amend the IGO amendment to Senate File Number 972, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A54.
Representative Stephenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Igo, for bringing this amendment. Northeastern Minnesota is a special part of our state. I enjoy every time I go up there, and I wish I could get up there more frequently. I appreciate what you said, that we should be really mindful about how our energy policy affects northeastern Minnesota. I just offered this amendment because I thought that your amendment was a little one-sided because it only talked about how it could harm. And I wanted to also bring in that there could be positive effects too, and we should consider both sides of the coin when we're looking at our energy policy, because new energy developments could have a positive effect on northeastern Minnesota. And I can point out the fact that, thanks to great work by Representative Listlegard, for example, we're on the precipice in this bill of having the second largest solar manufacturer in the country in northeastern Minnesota, and that's thanks to Representative Listlegard's leadership. We also have, of course, the Port of Duluth, which 60%, as I heard Senator Bach say on the Senate floor the other day, still is mining, but we know that wind turbines, I saw the last time I was at the Port of Duluth, I saw these huge wind turbines coming through the Port of Duluth, and that's an important driver there. So I wanted us to look at both the pro and the con, and so I hope you will consider this a friendly amendment.
Representative Igo.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Stephenson. I think that is a good way to look at things because, you know what, if we start looking at what clean energy can do for northeastern Minnesota, I think it can be great because we can build all that clean energy with copper and nickel. So I think this would be a friendly amendment if we add it and we look at it in that light. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. Motion prevails. On the underlying amendment, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 972, as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. Seeing none. The member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I want to comment on the climate and energy. I've enjoyed serving on the committee. It's been quite enlightening and educational. But I do have a lot of concerns, okay, members? First off, I mentioned California before, but Reuters reported on the German green energy drive. And by the way, I renamed the green energy drive the greed energy drive, because basically you're manipulating the price of electricity for the benefit of the few at the expense of the many. And it's not creating clean energy. Anyway, from Reuters, Germany had a study, and they are transitioning. They're one of the most ambitious countries ambitioning to alternative energy. Here's the results, and this is dated March 30th, 2021. Household electricity bills, the highest in Europe. They warned, this government report warns of supply shortage risk after reactors are switched off. Germany's energy transition has proved to, I gotta put the glasses on. Too costly and underestimated the risk of the federal audit, of the government audit office report. More than 50% of households' power bills are made up of taxes and fees. More than 50% of their household bills is taxes and fees, much of which support the transition away from coal, gas, and nuclear. 43% of them more expensive. They are 43% more expensive on their electricity rates than 27 other European Union's members. It's going to likely cost to upgrade the grid in terms of US dollars, $99.77 billion or $100 billion of additional cost and taxes by 2030. That's your result that you're bringing here with this bill, members. It's a greed New Deal, not a Green New Deal. We already talked about the poisonous gases coming from our landfills. The other thing, just to help you understand why we're in the mess we are with this alternative energy, I gave out a book, Why Scientists Disagree About Global Warming. It's written by 3 eminently qualified scientists. In there, they say from 2010 to 2013, the federal government under Obama administration subsidized global warming research to this tune of $64 billion. Now, members, if you gave me $1 million to research the mating habits of frogs, what do you think I'd be doing, okay? And my point is this: government subsidies have corrupted the scientific method because government subsidies come with an agenda. You find evidence for this, we'll send you more money. That's what's going on, and this book details it. This book destroys the 97% argument that scientists agree on global warming. It's a fraud, members, a total fraud, made-up fraud. The other thing, I got a note from one of my local co-ops on the propane. It said, according to Mark Mills at the Manhattan Institute, a single electric car battery weighs about 1,000 pounds, and manufacturing it requires mining and over 50,000 pounds of raw material. This bill is going to cause more pollution. It's going to cause more environmental problems, not solve them. Members, if you care about your constituents, your businesses, don't buy into the pipe dream of global warming. You know, the Paris Accord, which is going to cost this country trillions of dollars, is nothing but a United Nations tax scam. You know, I do believe in our country of freedom of speech. However, I think those who are fanatical disciples and anti-science about global warming should have a law that they have to wear a Chicken Little outfit whenever they talk about it. The sky is falling and I need your money. That's what it amounts to. Now, I said I'd keep my comments to about 2 minutes, according to staff. However, I'm starting to feel like Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I could talk about this all night. And you know what? I almost desire to because of the ramifications of what you're trying to ram down to the citizens and businesses of this state and the damage you're going to do to the environment. God help that you come to your senses when you believe in this stuff. It's a bunch of nonsense. Look at the facts and the science. Energy prices higher, the environment worse off. It's not Green New Deal, it's Greed New Deal. You're supporting a bill that benefits the few at the expense of the many, some of whom are out of our state and even out of our country. Is that what you want to do for Minnesotans? I don't think you should. I think you should care about the people in this state and the jobs in the economy and the job producers in this state, and we can have a clean environment. Natural gas, nuclear, hydro, large-scale hydro, even clean coal technology is available. We can do this and have cheap, reliable, and efficient energy. Energy should be cheap and plentiful. It shouldn't be restricted and high and unreliable. If you look at the elements put inside of solar and wind, they're dirty, and it creates, alternative energy is dirty, inefficient, and expensive. That's what we're promoting. You're going to have one of the worst environmental disasters in the history of this state when these solar panels and the windmills go kaput. Look into what you do with them. I just had a brother-in-law went through Iowa, and he drove by where these kaput windmills are. They're just stacked on top of each other. They're not recyclable. Is that what you want for this state? And when I ask that the owners of the windmills and the solar gardens, who's going to pay for this, the response I got in committee was, well, the co-ops will pay for it, but they won't pass it on to the ratepayers. If you believe that one, I got a bridge in London to sell you. Somebody's going to have to pay millions upon millions of dollars to clean this mess up. Please vote against this bill. Please look at both sides of the issue. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
The member from Washington, Representative Christensen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. I will make this very brief. We have a long and winding road to go here, but I would just like to bring up in the energy bill a provision that I included in there, and that is developing an energy transition legacy plan for the communities that will be closing in the pretty near future, closing their coal plants. The bill was agreed to. It's a legacy office that's going to help folks transition, help workers transition throughout this, these turbulent times that we're in. And it's been bipartisan all the way through. It's the folks up in Greater Minnesota voted for it. The Senate is going to vote it through, and so there's a happy bill in here that we can celebrate. I would also like to say that I've enjoyed serving on the Energy Committee and all the debate. It's all good for us, I guess, and I want everyone to vote green on the bill. Thank you.
The member from Otter Tail, Representative Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I had the privilege of serving on the Commerce Committee this session, and I want to thank Chair Stephenson and Lead O'Driscoll for setting a high bar for committee work. To start, I'll highlight a few aspects of the commerce portion of the bill that I'm glad were included. First, Representative Ryer's bill on deferred annuities will help make annuities a more viable retirement solution for Minnesotans. Properly structured annuities can have an important role in addressing our retirement savings crisis. In addition, I'm glad that the Reserve Credit Act is included in the Omnibus. This bill will remove unnecessary collateral requirements on reinsurers and also help protect the Commerce Department's ability to regulate Minnesota's insurance market. That said, I am disappointed that the Commerce Bill doesn't do more to address health insurance costs. In particular, we had 2 successful hearings on important bills that would reduce healthcare costs for Minnesotans. Regrettably, these bills are not included in the omnibus before the House. First, the reinsurance bill that we've already debated today is not included. Reinsurance has a proven track record of reducing health insurance costs for Minnesotans. Second, I am disappointed that Representative Elkin's insurance mandate review bill, House File 55, is not included. House File 55 has broad bipartisan support and would help the legislature understand the costs and benefits of new health insurance mandates before passing them into law. Both of these bills will reduce the cost of health insurance for Minnesotans. They should be included in this omnibus, and I hope that both of these bills are passed into law this session. Lastly, I want to discuss a provision in the commerce portion of the omnibus that might sound like a good idea, but really isn't. The Prescription Drug Affordability Board language included in the omnibus has been heralded by proponents as the Public Utility Commission for prescription drugs. The board will attempt to set prices for prescription drugs, much like how the PUC sets electricity rates. However, I fear that at minimum, this price-setting board will leave the state of Minnesota with a stack of legal bills after the board's power has been invalidated by the courts. At worst, this board could leave Minnesotans without access to key pharmaceuticals. While almost all states have a public utility commission, No states have a functioning price-setting board when it comes to prescription drugs. This is for two good reasons. First, the state likely lacks constitutional authority to set prices for prescription drugs. Second, a state cannot practically dictate prices to an international pharmaceutical company without serious repercussions. If this board sets a price that companies are unwilling to sell at, Minnesotans could lose access to life-saving treatments. Again, it sounds like a nice idea to have the state just tell Big Pharma that we're going to pay less for our drugs, but it just won't work, which is why other states haven't done it. Madam Speaker and members, I would encourage a no vote on the omnibus bill today. The bill before the House has too many partisan provisions that won't help Minnesotans, and just as important, the bill is missing proven bipartisan solutions that will help Minnesotans. I thank Chair Stephenson and Lead O'Driscoll for their leadership, and I look forward to working with them to put together a final commerce package that can earn bipartisan support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill includes important measures such as addressing the skyrocketing price of prescription drugs through a prescription drug affordability board, addressing catalytic converter theft, and creating a student loan borrower bill of rights. This bill also tackles the climate crisis. Minnesota is one of the fastest warming states in the country and is already experiencing the impacts of climate change. We must take action to protect our health, our farms, and our infrastructure. Transitioning to clean energy and investing in energy efficiency will save Minnesotans money on their utility bills. People of color and indigenous communities are disproportionately impacted by pollution and other consequences of climate change. This bill ensures that these Minnesotans can access jobs and other benefits created during the transition to clean energy. I'm particularly glad that this bill contains a provision I authored, which would establish a revolving loan fund for building improvements that will reduce energy and water consumption in state-owned buildings. These are improvements that save money but are often overlooked because of limited operating funds. State agencies have ambitious sustainability goals, and this provision will make it easier for those goals to be met. Examples of eligible projects include LED lighting, digital controls for heating and cooling, ground and air source pumps, and low-flow fixtures. All cabinet-level agencies would be eligible for the loans. This is just one of many provisions that will help us address the climate crisis, and I encourage members to support this important bill.
The member from Stearns, Representative Tice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There is in section, no, I lost it. Article 10, section 11, section 10 talks about the Met Council and their electric bus purchases. Met Council had decided 3 years ago that they were going to go with the electric buses, but they found out after they had gotten some that they weren't working really great and they had to work on them. So just recently, the Met Council had made a contract with New Flyer in St. Cloud for biodiesel buses. And I would like to know if Chair Stephenson would yield if that affects that contract at all. Madam Speaker.
He will yield. Representative Stephenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Tyson, that's a good question. I think that provision is actually in the climate and energy portion of the bill. I can look into it and get back to you, though.
Representative Tice.
Thank you for that information. But I also want to say that it references section 11, subdivision 8 for funding, and that is actually has to do with charging stations and not the Met Council electric rebates. I think there's like a $5 million appropriation for the electric buses. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chair Long, for allowing me to speak on this. So first, I want to say unequivocally that climate change is real, and taking bold action to confront the climate crisis is urgent, and it cannot wait. Fortunately, this is a really exciting time to be working in climate and energy. It's a moment where science and consumer concern and economics have all intersected, where it makes good business sense to do the right thing, and where we as legislators get to guide policy to help businesses thrive in a new, greener economy. I'm very excited and proud of my contributions to this bill. Our electric school bus program makes it easier for school districts to purchase and maintain electric buses. We've corrected outdated approaches to measuring electricity demand to ensure that utilities are not overcharging their solar customers. we've established a framework for Minnesota community groups and nonprofits to be compensated for providing useful contributions to determinations made by the Public Utilities Commission. And finally, we've tackled head on the issue of energy storage, which is critical to addressing climate change and moving to 100% clean energy. But beyond my own small contributions, this is just a really solid bill. It's ambitious, but carefully crafted. And most importantly, it has broad impact. This is a bill for the greater Minnesota farmers who want more energy independence. It's a bill for business owners who want to go green, but are concerned about the cost. It's a bill for mothers in North Minneapolis who worry about their kids' asthma attacks as he waits for the bus. And it's a bill for our brothers and sisters in labor who are worried about making ends meet as we transition to green energy. This is a bill for all Minnesotans, and I hope you'll join me in voting green. Thank you.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And frankly, in the discussion, I would have hoped for better or stronger confirmation on and discussion of stable, resilient power grid. We talked a little bit about hydro, but apparently only small hydro is important, but no, it's not. Hydro is the key. Doesn't have a thermal delay. You can dial it up when you need it. It's responsive, inexpensive, and is great baseline power. You hear renewable, you hear carbon-free. Nuclear is great baseline carbon-free power. And we need to utilize it for hydrogen, a source of hydrogen production for fuel cells, which can be utilized in agriculture because you can't take and have 5 tractors so you can, during spring planting, plug them in and keep rotating them out. So we have to be innovative and look at new technology and support that with our policies so that we can be a leader and, again, utilize and leverage our nuclear for hydrogen production, for clean fuel cell technology. Natural gas, that's the reason why the United States leads the world in decreased carbon footprint. And it's local here. I've always been confused why we have flaring instead of working out pipelines to utilize natural gas more effectively in our state. But again, I'm not seeing the progress in this bill to set us for the future. I hear all about cheap forms, but if you look at the details, what are the real input costs? That's obscured. There's preferential cost shifting, and there's a disconnect from what is the actual cost. Recently, we had issues with biomass generation, and the cost was horrendous, but we were forcing one of our main utilities to use that power, and most of the cost was shipping, transportation from Wisconsin across our state to the facilities. They were going 24/7. We've got to be more intelligent in how we do our mandates so that we don't end up having more stupid things like that happen. Because, frankly, we need our country to lead with innovation and technology, and we as a state need to participate in that leadership. This bill misses because it will increase your neighbors' electric bills. I fear it's going to cause our grid to become less resilient, and it's going to hurt our economy. So let's partner with our businesses, our job creators, and the innovators of our state to lead and not just do things that sound and feel good, but are sound science. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank Chair Stephenson and Long for putting together a commerce and climate and energy omnibus that includes important consumer protections and measures to position Minnesota as a clean energy leader. Of the many lessons we've hopefully learned this year, the importance of public health has to be one of them. We all deserve to have the best possible chance to live a healthy life. For some of us, that means periodically needing to take a prescription drug. For many of us, that means we need to take medication daily in order to thrive and to survive. Unfortunately, many Minnesotans struggle to afford the prescription drugs they need. A recent study showed that 45% of Minnesotans are worried about the cost of prescription drugs, and 21% have rationed prescription medication in the last year due to cost. Members, this is a matter of life and death for many Minnesotans. Drugs do not work if people are unable to access them because they're too expensive. The state has both the duty and the responsibility to take action to address the skyrocketing cost of prescription drugs. The complex and convoluted pharmaceutical supply chain works for many of its stakeholders, but not for patients, who are otherwise known as people. A prescription drug affordability board is one way to ensure that Minnesotans can afford the medications they need. In fact, it was a top recommendation of the Attorney General's bipartisan task force on lowering pharmaceutical drug prices, and a top strategy of a Health and Human Services Blue Ribbon Commission charged with finding savings in the state budget. Prescription drug affordability boards have been passed in 6 other states because of the urgency of this issue. The independent board will review prescription drugs that exceed certain thresholds and pose an affordability challenge to patients or the state's health system. The board will consider a broad range of information when it evaluates the affordability of a drug. And if the board determines that there is an affordability challenge, it may vote to set an upper payment limit, which applies to all public and private payments and reimbursements for that drug for Minnesotans. We have a responsibility to ensure the physical and financial health of Minnesotans and Minnesota. Without a tool like the Prescription Drug Affordability Board, the entire state pays the price. Costs show up in health insurance premiums. Prescription drugs account for about 25% of premium costs. And we pay a public health toll when our community members can't afford the medicine they need. And Minnesotans across the state are paying the price with their lives and livelihoods. Members, please join me in voting green for the Commerce and Energy Omnibus, which includes the Prescription Drug Affordability Board, and vote to protect the health and finances of Minnesotans.
The member from Brown, Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's a provision in this legislation called the Low Carbon Fuel Standard. It was introduced by Representative Lippert after deadline. It was never voted on in either the Commerce or the Energy Committee, and never even talked about in the Transportation Committee. It's another import from California, similar to others that we've been talking about today, including the clean car standards. This low carbon fuel standard could add as much as 46 cents a gallon to the cost of fuel in the state of Minnesota. This money would not go to help build or maintain any of our roads. This is a huge potential burden on Minnesota consumers, one that should have been heard in all 3 of these committees. It should have been voted on. It should have been introduced in time. Madam Chair, it's just one of a long list of reasons why we should vote no on today's bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The member from Rice, Representative Lippert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We need to act aggressively on climate change because it's impacting Minnesotans right now. I hear from farmers regularly about how the rains are pounding the soil like never before. We've had 3 500-year floods in Northfield in the last 15 years. And whenever I talk with students at St. Olaf and Carleton, they press upon me the urgency of climate change. They can't imagine what their future, our future, is going to be like in 2040, 2050, unless we act aggressively. So I want to thank Chair Long for a climate and energy bill that does act aggressively to respond to climate change, and want to mention a few provisions. I'm proud the future fuels provision is in this bill because it will give Minnesota a tool to reduce carbon emissions in the transportation sector, cleaning the whole life cycle of biofuels, and accelerating the electrification in the transportation sector too, allowing Minnesota to be a leader in the Midwest. The solar on farmland provisions will help with solar siting and be good for rural economic development. And the Innovation Finance Authority will help deploy technologies that have trouble getting financing, like energy efficiency projects for households with low incomes.
Members, it's getting a little loud in the chamber. If we can please take our conversations off the House floor. Representative Lippert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We can accelerate our transition to a clean energy economy and do that in a just way. There's so much to like in this bill, and I appreciate the holistic approach to climate change that this bill is taking. So I'm proud to support it, and I urge members to do the same.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Chair Long, I really enjoyed my time in the Energy Committee this year. Well, actually, it was more of a climate change committee than an energy committee, but nonetheless, I think we had a healthy debate on green energy legislation. I'm going to be honest about this bill, and actually about legislation really throughout this entire session at the Capitol, that so much of the legislation has provisions about race. And, you know, when you direct money to certain races, it creates prejudice legislation. And, you know, discussing all of these provisions about race when we're talking about energy policy, which really should be blind to race, it was very frustrating to hear that, and hearing from my constituents about how, you know, so much more money is directed to certain areas. It was very frustrating to see, and I think that the irony in having this racist legislation that directs money to a particular race or to protect or to help a certain ethnic group is because what we're talking about is promoting green energy, and you know, green energy is creating these products that are mined in third world countries. And we've talked about this in committee. You know, almost a majority of the nickel that we import comes from the Philippines. And they have continually shut down the mines in the Philippines for polluting, because they have horrible, horrible conditions in which they mine nickel in the Philippines. And when we talk about the materials that we're mining for these products, we have to look at the supply chain and compare the environmental damage that we're doing with each of these products that goes into green energy products. Now, the batteries that are used for electric vehicles, for instance, which is heavily promoted in this bill, are 65% nickel, 65%. So when we talk about preventing nickel mining in Minnesota, and yet we promote nickel mining overseas, we're actually just shifting that environmental destruction to third world countries. And that's very frustrating to see. I had a long discussion with a member from across the aisle who, after hearing me talk about this for 3 years, spent some time on the internet finding how there's major corporations that are heavily invested in the Congo because they're mining cobalt. And this cobalt is mined using 50,000 child slave labor. You know, so there is a, you know, British and Swiss held conglomerate that owns most of these mines that deal in slavery. And that is what we're teaching our kids, especially when we in this bill, put money forward for electric buses. In this electric school bus has 1,250 pounds of nickel in its battery, and also a lot of cobalt, and of course lithium. And if you would go online and search how lithium mines completely destroy the environment in which they're mined, that is something that we own by promoting this legislation and using taxpayer dollars to subsidize these industries. Now, another industry that I did a lot of research on that's impacted by this bill, because we promote wind energy, is neodymium mining. In neodymium mining, which occurs almost entirely in China, mines this material to make the rare earth magnets that are used in the wind turbines. Now, there's 17 elements that are known as rare earth metals that occur in these hard rock deposits, and they are they're used to make the alloys for these huge permanent magnets that are found in the synchronous generators and the direct drive and the onshore wind turbines and that we have here in southern Minnesota. And these are also used in electric cars. Without these rare earth magnets, the generators and the electric motors in these cars would have to be so much heavier to be powerful enough, and they would be less energy efficient. But it increases the amount of mining that we're doing. And these materials, when they're mined, in which they're also mixed with radioactive materials such as thorium and uranium, when they're very hard to separate out. And so doing so requires an enormous amount of energy to process it. And of course, they use a lot of acid to strip these minerals apart. And as you can see from the picture behind me, there's a 5.5 mile wide toxic lake in the city of Batao in China that is permanently destroyed the environment and has polluted the water for millions of people. This is the environmentalists' dream, to have green energy. But what they don't understand is that the green energy is really destroying the environment in third world countries. Now, there are reasons to mine these materials to make products, and I support the idea of doing so. But we should be mining in the United States, where we have strict environmental standards and labor standards, where we wouldn't have slavery, and we're not going to destroy the environment. It is a balancing act between, saving the air versus poisoning the earth. And no one seems to understand that we are destroying the environment permanently with these products that we're mining overseas. Now, also in this bill, because we promote wind energy, we have an issue of wind turbines, and we discussed this in committee, where each wind turbine weighs, thousands and thousands of pounds, and they are just being shipped out of state because we don't bury them here, and there's no useful byproduct for them. We haven't told the industry that you must recycle these wind turbine blades. They used to be made of fiberglass, which was recyclable, but because they would break so easily, they melted them together with plastic to make glass reinforced plastic. And when those things are melded together, there's no useful byproduct, but you can't heat it up to melt the glass without burning the plastic and contaminating the whole product. We talked in committee about how maybe we can grind these up and use them in asphalt, but the people that resurface roads don't want to breathe that stuff in either. So they're being shipped out to Wyoming and buried in the landfill. There's 1,100 of them that were just buried in the landfill. That's millions and millions of pounds of plastic. And we have environmentalists worried about plastic straws. Yet this is the environmental cost of green energy. We must continue to look at the supply chain for green energy so that we can actually assess the damage that we're doing, the amount of energy that goes into this. Like Representative Igo said about transporting these materials from overseas using ships that are burning heavy diesel that's polluting the environment. There is an environmental cost. There is a carbon output for every product that's produced. And somehow the creators of this bill and the people that are voting to think that we're saving the world believe that windmills and solar panels grow out of cornfields, and that they're actually not mined out of the earth, and that there's a ton of energy that goes into them. Now, in the solar provisions in this bill, I think solar is really great, but there is an enormous amount of solar waste that's created. In 2015, 200,000 solar panels in an enormous industrial solar array were shattered by a tornado that whipped through. And we have a lot of tornadoes in my area in southern Minnesota, and I'm sure we have across the entire state. And they do an enormous amount of damage to an industrial solar array, which is what I call solar gardens, because we're not gardening there. This is an industrial solar array. And there are frequently about 32 acres of solar panels in these clusters that have tons of toxic minerals in them. And when they're broken, they can't be recycled. They're broken and they're in the ground, and we try to pick up as many pieces as we can, but there are chemicals that leach into the ground, and we poison the water. There's not enough provisions. I offered an amendment to require the companies have insurance to guarantee cleanup, but that was rejected. We need to do more to make sure that we're protecting the water and protecting the ground, instead of just focusing on what's told to be carbon-free or clean energy when it's not. We don't allow large-scale hydro. Representative Kwan brought that up too. They have 600 and 700 megawatt power, renewable energy, which is almost entirely carbon free. There's a small amount of carbon used to create the concrete and place it in some maintenance work, but it generates a ton of clean energy. And yet this doesn't count as renewable energy under Minnesota law. Why not? We need to do more to promote the right kind of energy and to assess all energy sources and judge how much carbon and damage that each energy source is doing before we push the industry in one way or the other. And I know there's a lot of lobbyists that get rich on green energy, and this is a great thing for them. But we also, I think we talked about earlier about burning trash. This is a great source. It's a renewable energy source because we have trash all the time, and so burning that trash as opposed to putting it in a landfill reduces the amount of methane. That's a terrible greenhouse gas, and we need to weigh that. And we need to say that it's no longer allowed because there is some carbon output is ridiculous. There's a ton of methane that's emitted when this material breaks down. We have a facility here in Mankato that I toured with other legislators, and they're doing a great job at reducing the landfill waste and generating electricity while we're doing it. And interestingly enough, the bill that bans burning trash doesn't actually ban burning of trash. It bans generating electricity from burning of trash. You can still burn it, you just can't generate electricity from it. Well, how dumb are we? That just doesn't make any sense. So members, it's no surprise that I'll be voting against the bill today. I really enjoy green energy. I think it's exciting stuff, but we should not be ignoring the fact that we're doing terrible environmental damage and there are human rights atrocities around the world, especially slavery, especially child slavery. I mean, teaching kids about the school buses, electric school buses and how great they are. And at the same time, putting a 2,000 pound lithium ion battery that's made 65% nickel and a whole bunch of cobalt that was mined by children in the Congo. It just seems to be hypocritical of us to mandate those things. So members, I would ask that we really stop supporting slavery. I know that one of the investments in for most of the state employees is in the company that owns mines in the Congo. So, by voting yes in this bill, you're helping your own stock portfolio, but that we should be not supporting that. And we should actually move to take that company out of the state's retirement fund as well. I would encourage members to do some research and understand the human atrocities that are being caused by green energy and this rush to increase nickel and lithium mining around the world. We can mine nickel here safely. If we can't mine it here safely, if you won't let us mine it here under the strictest environmental and labor standards, we certainly should not be requiring that it be mined overseas in third world countries with slave labor. So thank you, members, and please vote no.
The member from Dakota, Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to first thank Chair Long as well and all the members of the Energy Committee for the good dialogue and discussion on the legislation before you today. This bill in its totality will make Minnesota a leader in the renewable energy transition while delivering jobs and improvements in the lives of all Minnesotans. I'm very pleased to see the weatherization provision in the bill. This provides jobs, economic activity, and savings for ratepayers in every county of the state. It also serves Minnesota's most vulnerable in all our districts. But members, we need to do more. County by county, we are only completing a fraction of the need. At our present rate, it will take 290 years to meet the need. Members, this bill gives us that opportunity. Minnesota also has the opportunity to lead or follow in the global energy transition. We have led before. Let's do it again. Members, please vote green.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So we've done some of speaking of the human rights issues. So the California Energy First bill to me is kind of a joke. You know, members, we are mandating electric buses that don't work. Star Tribune article had a nice little write-up about that 5-6 weeks ago. But the batteries, they are made with slave labor from places like Congo. It might be a feel-good bill for you, right? But what about the actual human beings that are forced to work in horrible, horrible conditions? We are expanding solar panels, but fail to properly discuss the human rights impacts and slave labor in Xinjiang, China, with the Uyghur Muslims. Like I said, it might be a feel-good bill for you, but what about those who are forced to work in atrocious conditions so that Democrats here in this body can achieve a green utopia? We are in America, the land of the free, and there are those that have to work super hard under horrible conditions and against their own will so that we can move forward with these ridiculous goals. So I'm just gonna give you some facts, what these human beings go through, and you can marinate on that as you vote on this bill. So this is all, you can Google all this stuff. This isn't just Mary Franson making things up. This isn't a conspiracy theory. These are facts. This comes straight from amnesty.org. But first, before I read this quote, there was a quote, a paraphrase about this bill is a vision, right? It sets us on a path to quit pollution. That was the paraphrase. Well, think about this. I don't think your vision kind of matches up with what those in Congo are going through. When you visit this area of the DRC, one of the most striking things you will see is how polluted it is and how little is being done by the environment and mining companies to prevent pollution and protect the people living and working there. They simply can't escape the dust. When we first went into the mines in 2015, we saw how men, women, and children were working without even the most basic protective equipment, such as gloves and face masks. And miners told us about the health conditions they experienced, including coughing, pain in their lungs, and urinary tract infections. In one village we visited, people showed us how the water in the local stream that they drank, that they said was contaminated by the discharge of waste from a mineral processing plant. There was also a comment that was made about 4,000 Minnesotans suffering and dying from climate change, or 4,000 early deaths due to climate change in Minnesota. Well, what about the lives that I just spoke about there? Coughing, pain in their lungs, urinary tract infections. I'm pretty sure the life expectancy of these individuals is not very good. This comes from CBS News. This is a March 6th, 2018. Health risks of chronic exposure. According to the CDC, chronic exposure to cobalt-containing hard metal, dust, or fume can result in a serious lung disease called hard metal lung disease, a kind of, pneumonia. I can't even pronounce it because it's a big word, meaning a lung disease caused by inhaling dust particles. Inhalation of cobalt particles can cause respiratory sensitization, asthma, decreased pulmonary function, and shortness of breath, the CDC says. The health agency says skin contact is also a significant health concern because dermal exposure to hard metal and cobalt salts can result in significant systematic uptake. Sustained exposures can cause skin sensitization, which may result in eruptions of contact dermatitis. Once again, we were discussing about 4,000 early deaths due to climate change in Minnesota. But what about the human beings that are suffering so that Minnesota can achieve green energy goals? And then we have this wonderful article from February 2nd, 2021 from the BBC. Their goal is to destroy everyone. Uyghur camp detainees allege systematic rape. In a separate testimony to the Uyghur Human Rights Project, Sedek said she heard about an electrified stick being inserted into women to torture them. They were 4 kinds of electric shock, Sedek said: the chair, the glove, the helmet, and the anal rape with a stick. I'm not going to continue reading on, but the final quote, "It was absolutely horrendous," she said. "I felt I had died. I was dead." Another quote I heard today: "Clean energy means jobs, which is growing at 2.5 times the rate of other jobs." Members, how many people are needed to experience rape and other unimaginable experiences so that this state can achieve its green energy goals? April 20th, the New York Times, just yesterday. China's solar dominance presents Biden with an ugly dilemma. Biden's vow to work with China on issues like climate change is clashing with his promise to defend human rights. Set goes on to read, China also supplies many of the key components in solar panels, including more than 80% of the world's polysilicon, a raw material that most solar panels use to absorb energy from sunlight. Nearly half of the global supply comes from Xinjiang alone. In 2019, less than 5% of the world's polysilicon came from US-owned companies. It's put Democrats in a hard position, said Francine Sullivan, the vice president for business development at REC Silicon, a polysilicon maker based in Norway with factories in the United States. Do you want to stand up for human rights in China, or do you want cheap solar panels? Members, as you vote today, that's what you get to think about. That's what you need to marinate on. Do you want to stand up for human rights in China, or do you want cheap solar panels? These are real issues. I am just shocked that we aren't taking this more seriously. And I do appreciate the amendments that were accepted. And I hope it wasn't just to keep this conversation from escalating. But I do hope that when the bill comes out of conference committee, that my amendments that were adopted, one saying that the public utility may only purchase energy generated by a solar garden if the owner of this community solar garden has certified to the utility that no child labor or slave labor was used to extract the minerals or materials that compose the community garden's solar panels. I hope that stays in. I also hope that the study of the human rights impact of enactment, if this bill were to be enacted, it stays in as well, because members, we need to know. We need to know the real human cost to moving toward these bold visionary goals that this body has set before us. This body either cares about human rights or it does not. We should not be pushing California Energy First standards off the backs of slave labor and child labor. It's disgusting, and we are better than that. Members, I ask you to vote no. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm from Hennepin County. Thank you, members.
I'm so
really
sorry,
proud-
Representative Lee. Representative Lee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm really proud of this bill, especially the climate and energy provisions that take significant steps toward addressing equity, environmental, and climate justice. The bill funds a pilot project in North Minneapolis to provide training pathways into careers in the clean energy economy for students and young adults in underserved communities. This provision will help Minnesota meet the workforce demands in various sectors of the emerging clean energy economy and engages and equip community members who have traditionally not participated in the energy career pathways. Additionally, the bill establishes the Rebuild Right Grant program to help repair, rebuild, and renovate existing buildings that were damaged by the civil unrest in May and June of last year with clean energy technology and energy efficiency. As our community works to heal and recover, we are thinking carefully about how we can rebuild in a way that best position our residents and businesses for success, that best integrate workforce diversity, equity, the needs of under-resourced communities, and community outreach success. Lastly, I want to speak to the investment we made in all electric buses for Metro Transit. We must make investment in the infrastructure now, even if it costs more upfront. And to one of the questions that was brought up earlier around the Metro Transit procurement, when we were going through putting the bill together, the Met Council did not reach out to share any concerns about their current procurement of biodiesel buses. And so, members, I encourage you to support this because we are making significant investment into equity in education, equity in skills training, equity in health outcomes, and equity in economic opportunity, and equity in our infrastructure. I'm glad today to hear my colleagues on the other side of the aisle talk about some of the health outcomes in other countries, but we need to look at the health outcomes of our communities right here in our backyard. I'm glad that we did not, take one of the amendments that was brought forth before to allow for the HERT facility that's in my backyard and Representative Abadge's backyard to continue to be counted towards as generating renewable energy. Our frontline communities has been impacted by pollution and by garbage incineration for a long time. I know that all of us in here, we will do everything in our part to not have one incinerator in our backyard. So why are we, willing to vote for that amendment to let that continue to operate in a community that's, predominantly Black, Brown, Indigenous, and communities of color? So members, I'm proud of the work that we did in this bill to address equity, and I encourage your green vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Traverse, Representative Backer.
Madam Speaker, members, thank you. A lot has been covered about the human rights issues and concerns of the labor, so I'm not going to redo that. The key thing that I'm going to talk about, yesterday we passed a bill out of the House floor that hurts Minnesota workers, making it harder for Minnesotans to get jobs. This bill will do the same. We just have this continual pattern of attack on Minnesota workers and job risk takers and job creators with the challenges that we're going to see with energy and good, clean supply of electricity, because this bill will not provide that. I just cannot support it. We're just continually going after hardworking Minnesotans and also the Minnesotans who help create those jobs. It's a combination. It's not just the entrepreneurs, it's the workers, it's people working side by side to make Minnesota better. Yesterday's bill didn't do it. This bill doesn't do it. And then also the concerns that I talked about earlier with these acres and acres of solar panels, what we're going to do after they come out of use. Who's going to be stuck with that product with a lot of toxic stuff in those solar panels? So I'm not going to be supporting this bill. I do appreciate your time, Madam Speaker and members. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Katizo Atun.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, the bill before us today contains many commerce provisions that enhance business practices and protect Minnesota consumers as we continue to battle the COVID-19 pandemic and come through stronger on the other side. I'd like to thank Chair Stephenson for his leadership and to our staff for all their work to put together a bill that helps address some of the inequities that have been exacerbated over the past year. We are taking action on COVID relief payments, protecting them from garnishment, working to cap the out-of-pocket fees that are charged to restaurants by third-party delivery services. In particular, I'm proud of the work the committee has done on pharmaceutical drug affordability, as well as financial protections from payday lending and economic education for educators. When given the opportunity to rein in big business, protect Minnesotans from toxic toys and price gouging, and work to prevent catalytic converter thefts, the House DFL will choose people over profit every time. So for the sake of your constituents and folks all across the state, I hope you'll join me in voting green today. Thank you.
The member from Washington, Representative Jurgens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to talk a little bit more about catalytic converter theft. And I want to thank Chair Stephenson for including some language in the bill to address that problem. We've all heard about the increase in catalytic converter thefts, especially over the last year or so. Some of the reasons for that are because of the increase in the value of precious metals that are contained in the catalytic converters, palladium, rhodium, and platinum. Palladium and rhodium are both more valuable than gold right now. Part of the reason for that is because of the pandemic, there's been less mining in South Africa of those metals, which has driven the price up. And as the price goes up, then thieves are able to get more money for the stolen catalytic converters. A couple of months ago, I attended a virtual town hall meeting with residents in St. Paul to talk about this issue. Some of them had been hit, maybe not the same vehicle, but their families 2 and 3 times in recent months. This costs thousands of dollars to repair. You know, the fees can get maybe a couple $100s for a catalytic converter, but to replace it costs much more than that, if you can even find a replacement catalytic converter. Many of the muffler shops are telling me that they have a backlog of 2 to 3 months just to get a replacement. Some people wonder, is that covered by insurance? It is if you have comp coverage, comprehensive coverage on your automobile. Not everybody does. And even then, a deductible applies. So oftentimes it'll still cost you $500 or $1,000, depending on what your deductible is. The National Insurance Crime Bureau stopped tracking the thefts in 2015. Between 2008 and 2015, they saw a 23% increase in thefts of catalytic converters. But that was only on the claims, the insurance claims. So again, back to whether or not the victims had comp coverage or not. And I think that's probably why they stopped tracking it, is because it wasn't accurate information. It was only getting part of the story. One thing that I learned in researching the problem is that the majority of the metal recyclers in Minnesota are already tracking the identity of those selling or attempting to sell the catalytic converters. They're collecting the names, driver license information, license plate information, taking pictures, paying by check instead of by cash, all in an effort to help law enforcement and reduce or eliminate the market of selling stolen catalytic converters. I also, I also learned that there's another outlet that people will advertise online that they'll be at a certain big box parking lot on a certain day at a certain time, and they'll pay cash for any and all catalytic converters. Madam Speaker, I'm wondering if Chair Stephenson would yield for a quick question.
I am not certain he's available to yield at the moment. Representative Jurgens.
Okay, I was going to ask if the language in his bill addresses that. Maybe in his comments later he can. We know that the bill language has certain requirements for the recycling centers of what they need to do, but I'm wondering if it would also catch those that maybe set up shop in a parking lot somewhere and buy the catalytic converters. I do like in the bill that it does include a pilot program of marking or painting the vehicle ID numbers on the catalytic converters. That should help deter crime. If thieves see that, they might be less likely to steal it, knowing that it could get tracked back to a stolen catalytic converter at some point. So I'm in favor of the language in here in that pilot program. I think it'll go a long way. It's going to start out with vehicles that are most likely hit, the Toyota Prius, for example, Toyota Highlander, Mitsubishis. Those seem to be targeted. Anything where you can get under the vehicle easily, like a sport utility vehicle. Fleet vehicles, because it's like shooting fish in a barrel, they're all together in one spot. So those I know have been targeted in my district. I know that some people have even taken to letting the air out of the tires of their vehicles to make it more difficult for the thieves to get under the vehicles. So I think that there's more that we could do. I had the amendment that I withdrew that increased penalties. I think that's a discussion we could have. What is in the bill, I do like it. I think we could go a little bit further. At some point in time, I'd be willing to work with Chair Stephenson or whoever to make that happen. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. Tomorrow will be Earth Day. It will be the 51st Earth Day. The commemoration started in 1970. And it started with the initiative of Senator Gaylord Nelson, assisted by our late, great Vice President and then Senator Walter Mondale. On last year's Earth Day, which was the 50th anniversary, Representative Long and Representative Acom and I had the distinct honor of interviewing Vice President Mondale for a podcast. And towards the end of the podcast, we asked him, what do you feel is the most pressing environmental issue of the day? He said there are many, many issues, but climate change was the most urgent in his mind. And so today we have an opportunity to support a transformative bill that will move our state forward to address what Vice President Mondale correctly identified as the most pressing issue in the environment of our day. And I would say one of the most pressing overall. And as the chair of the Transportation Committee, I want to thank Representative Long and members of the committee for including several provisions that will move us forward in reducing greenhouse gases in the transportation sector, related to electrification of our transportation system, but also procuring building materials that are manufactured in a less carbon-intensive way. Some of those building materials are needed for the reconstruction of our road and bridge infrastructure. And so, members, I am very proud to support this bill. It is in the spirit of those original founders of Earth Day 51 years ago. We stand on their shoulders. Please vote green. Vice President Mondale would expect no less. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Acom. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and thank you to Chair Long for his leadership on our committee. This is a good, strong bill that's with many important provisions. So many of them have been talked about already, and I'm not going to go over everything that's been said. But voting for this bill is voting for the future. Our greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals were set in 2007. We have learned so much since that time, and our goals need to reflect current science. Voting for this bill is supporting the Next Generation Climate Act. Voting for this bill is supporting the increased production of renewable energy and benefit important programs like Solar on Schools. Voting for this bill will support the transition to beneficial electrification away from fossil fuels, as well as accelerate deployment of efficient technologies that would help conserve energy and greenhouse gas emissions. Members, vote green. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, for this very robust conversation that we've had this afternoon.
And I just want to let you know, folks, that on the commerce side, we did a lot of bipartisan work, but not enough to be able to earn my vote. And I would strongly encourage members to vote no on the bill. Things I do like and things our caucus does like in the bill. Number one, we do like the fact that we were able to find consensus on the 3 NIAC bills. We also do like the fact that we were able to finally get the volunteer driver issues over the finish line, no pun intended, with the work that was done bipartisanly. I also liked the opportunity to be able to partner this year with Representative Claiborne to work on some online continuing education and to introduce one of the nation's very first appraisal continuing education requirements that will be on the books if this bill becomes law, or some of the other alternatives that we're working on become law, to deal with valuation bias. This is a very important priority to those of us in the Republican caucus, that you should not value real estate based on who answers the door, but on the merits of the property and the market forces that bear on that. However, this is the point where we start to deviate from with our friends in the DFL caucus. We have some real concerns about the fact that House File 55 was not included in here, the work that Representative Elkins did. Representative Elkins said, instead of making determinations each and every time at the Commerce Committee in the House and the Senate, or at the Health and Human Services Committee, which coverages should be included and not included in health insurance, let's put it into a standardized process that we walk each of these requests through to come up with the answer on it. And I wish we could do that also with our pharmacy board that we had talked about in this bill. We're going to appoint a set of Minnesotans who don't have a lot of expertise in the industry or a lot of background in the industry, and have them determine what pharmaceutical prices would be. All we do is continue to provide the opportunity for outside influences, or where members know or have more of a firsthand experience with something, to give preference over others who have the same kinds of needs. Shouldn't we all as Minnesotans be given the equal opportunity to have our ailments and our need for prescriptions looked at? This bill doesn't address that. We've always had concerns about the way that the price gouging bill by Representative Stephenson has been crafted. We know he meant well by this, but we don't believe that it ultimately accomplishes what he's looking for and what Minnesotans need. We also, after hours of debate today, found that the charitable gaming provision that is in this bill needs a lot more work, and we're going to be leaving a lot of Minnesotans on the roadside wondering what happened, and their host businesses as to why are they getting the 1-2 punch from the state legislature. And also the overriding factor, very disappointed that we were not able to include the reinsurance provision in here. It is my sincere hope that we'll get another swing at this bill, that Republicans and Democrats alike can vote on this as it comes back from conference committee. So, Madam Speaker and members, please vote no on the bill before us today. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the great debate today, members. I've been thinking a lot about one of my political heroes this week, and that is Walter Mondale, similar to my seatmate, Representative Hornstein. And Walter Mondale's family, in the statement that they released on Tuesday, they first started with his Fair Housing Act leadership. But then they said this: "It is poignant that his other area of major policy focus was the environment. As the world is grappling with climate change, enters a new generation of critical work." Tomorrow is, as Representative Hornstein mentioned, Earth Day, and it'll be our 51st year. And when Representative Hornstein and I got to interview Vice President Mondale with Vice Chair Acom, we asked him what he thought 50 years on was the lessons learned from that Earth Day. And he said, "There's still a lot of work to do. I think global warming is a horrible issue. If we lose it, life itself could be badly damaged in the nation and the world. We have to keep pushing on that issue or we're in real trouble. This issue strikes me the hardest." So members, I'm hoping in honor of a true environmental champion of Walter Mondale that we can vote green today for clean energy jobs, for our climate, for our health, and for our future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you all for a great debate today. I first want to just thank all the great staff that we have. Bill Glahn, Bob Eloff, nonpartisan staff, and Solveig Beckel. Also want to thank the committee members on the Republican side, Rep. Igo, Gruenhagen, Franzen, Bowe, and Mecklin. The debate was good at times in committee, but oftentimes it was short. A lot of questions could be answered. Obviously, this year with COVID, the discussion oftentimes gets muted in order for time. And so I think we kind of missed out a bit with our committee in certain aspects, but a lot of those things are out of our control. The California Energy First bill that lays before us, I'm going to encourage folks to vote no today. This bill raises taxes, it raises fees, it increases mandates on business. It spends money on pet projects rather than return it to our neighbors to reduce their rates. This California Energy First bill puts at risk prime farmland here in the world's breadbasket, right here in Minnesota, and puts at risk the Amazon jungle, which will be turned black in order to farm that if we do not farm our own best ground. We have opportunities here, Minnesotans. We have opportunities as legislators. We had an opportunity to lessen energy costs. We had an opportunity to do things and include business, not just the special interest business that will benefit from this, but those that will pay the cost. I think Representative Miller said it best that, you know, our usage is going down, but our prices are going up. And those are real things to consider. We had an opportunity this session to reform community solar as it continues to outpace and outgrow its original capacity. We chose not to do that in this body, and we will be encouraging folks on the other side of the building to do so. This bill does many things, but it does not deserve your vote today. Vote no on this California Energy First bill. Vote red. And I just want to wish Ralco a happy 50th birthday today. Thank you.
The member from Anoka, Representative Stephenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. I'm a new finance chair. This is the first time I'm bringing an omnibus bill to the floor, so I had intended to be brief, but then I heard my friend and kind of mentor, Chair Marquardt, talk about, you know, a 30-minute speech, and so my close will be 45 minutes in 16 parts. No, I'm kidding. I'm just going to say this. I talked earlier about how northeastern Minnesota is a special place to me, and I recall the first time I took my daughters up to the North Shore. It made me think of that time, and we went up and we did all the things that you do on the North Shore. We saw the big boats go underneath the bridge, and we went to Gooseberry Falls and we saw Split Rock Lighthouse and all of that great stuff. And as we were driving home on a Sunday afternoon, I looked back in the back seat at my then 4-year-old daughter and said, "Nora, did you have a good time?" And she said, "Yeah, Dad, I had a good time." And I said, "Good, I'm glad. The North Shore has always been a very special place to me." And she said, "And now it's special to me too, Dad." And I'm not kidding, that's really what she said. And I almost drove off the road. You know, it's one of those moments that your heart is just so full. Members, that's what this is all about, isn't it? It's about what we pass along to that next generation. It's about how the things that are special to us, we want them to be special for our children and our grandchildren. And we have the opportunity to do that in this bill with the great visionary climate provisions that we've talked so much about, by making sure that people have the drugs that they need to live, by making sure that they can get a good education and that they don't get taken advantage of. Those are the opportunities we have in this bill. And I ask you to take advantage of them today and join me in voting green. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members voting remotely, please vote. Members, please vote. Will the clerk please call the names of the members who have not voted yet?
Bliss. Bliss.
Bliss, no.
Bliss, no. Bo.
Bo, no.
Bo, no. Davids.
Davis votes no.
Davids, no. Davney.
Gaffney, aye.
Davney, aye. Erickson. Erickson. Hamilton.
Hamilton, no.
Hamilton, no. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Heinrich.
Heinrich, no.
Heinrich, no. Hornstein.
Ornstein, aye.
Hornstein, aye. Jurgens. Jurgens, no. Keel. Keel, no. Kosnick.
Osnick, no.
Kosnick, no. Lee.
Lee, aye.
Lee, aye. Listlegard. Listlegard, aye. Lewick. Lewick, no. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. McDonald.
McDonald, no.
McDonald, no. Pearson.
Pearson, no.
Pearson, no. Sandell.
Sandell, yes.
Sandell, aye. Schumacher.
Schumacher, no.
Schumacher, no. Thompson.
Thompson, aye.
Thompson, aye. Erdahl.
Earl, no.
Erdahl, no.
Erickson, no. Erickson, no.
Erickson, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 70 ayes and 64 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. Announcement by the Speaker.
Announced by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 1077. Houseman, Howard, Agbaje, Ryer, and Tice. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on Senate File Number 975. Bernardi, Christensen, Keeler, Cleavorn, and O'Neill.
The next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 970. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File Number 970, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to public safety, the third engrossment.
Representative Mariani, would you like to insert the House language?
Madam Chair, I would so move.
Representative Mariani moves to insert the House language. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. Representative Mariani, to the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What I want to do is do an introduction of this bill. It's a pretty big bill, and I'm going to be joined by a few others that also do that. Madam Speaker, members, and to the good people of Minnesota who are watching this right now, it's my privilege today to offer this bill for passage by this House, the People's House. This omnibus bill contains the long and carefully deliberated work of the Committee on Public Safety, Criminal Justice Reform, and of the Judiciary Civil Law Committee chaired by my colleague, Representative Jamie Becker-Finn.
Representative Mariani, we would like you to speak up a little bit more so we can hear you a little bit better. Thank you.
Oh, okay. How am I sounding here?
That's better.
Okay. I'll try to use my my teacher voice then. So this bill combines the Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice Reform work and the work of the Judiciary Civil Law Committee chaired by my colleague, Representative Jamie Becker-Finn, and it meets core functions of government to provide for the general safety of all Minnesotans, to ensure that the constitutional rights of each and every person is secure and protected. And the bill, in keeping with the duty to provide for safety, also contains the vital work of Representative Gene Pawlowski, whose committee he chairs has brought forth major appropriations for our state's disaster assistance accounts. The bill funds the Department of Public Safety close to the governor's request for major work such as the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the BCA, Homeland Security and Emergency Management, our Fire Marshal, Office of Justice Programs, Emergency Communication Networks. It also funds the Department of Corrections, one of the largest state agencies in Minnesota that oversees and manages 14 security facilities. They also provide probation services across the state, often in strong coordination with our counties. Within the Department of Corrections, you'll also find very important work with our Office of Justice Programs. The bill also funds the Ombudsperson for Corrections, the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines, the Post Board, and the Private Detective Board. Madam Speaker, members, this bill, as all our bills should be, reflects the needs and realities of our time. This bill is being commonly referred to in the greater public as the law enforcement bill. Rest assured, there are strong and big law enforcement provisions within this bill that are quite important. But members, this bill does a lot of work in public safety across the board, in judiciary as well. Vice Chair Frazier will speak a little bit later to the law enforcement provisions, particularly our police reform provisions. Madam Speaker and members, it's my contention that this bill is a good cop bill. We appropriate more funds than the other body does, at least $9 million more in support of our law enforcement work in the state of Minnesota. We provide for extension of their training fund. We provide new resources for updating their policies using high quality national standards. We provide new resources.
Representative Mariani, we're going to ask you to turn up your volume or speak up a little bit, please.
My computer mysteriously muted me. I don't know what happened there. My apologies to everyone. Madam Speaker, members, we Minnesotans are a diverse people and one that occupy a large state. Our diversity is cultural and racial. Our diversity is regional. So this bill is intentionally constructed to acknowledge and address very real need to advance racial equity and regional equity. It sees the reality of Black Minnesotans experiencing desperate, harmful treatment at the hands of our public safety and corrections systems, such as the horrible death from negligence of Hardell Sherrill in a county jail in greater Minnesota, or the death of Duante Wright following a traffic stop for a low-level misdemeanor here in a Twin Cities suburb. The bill also sees the neglected reality of our poorest greater Minnesota counties, such as Wadena County, whose sheriff shared with us the near impossible choices of his officers desperately searching for mental health services in response to calls, knowing as good public servants that they are, that the disruptive individuals that they were called out to respond to can best be dealt with in treatment and not in jail. This bill seeks to provide better resources for public safety and corrections throughout our state, even as it recognizes that every community has its own realities and it has to tailor those resources to those realities. But this bill also expects constant standards that respect the human rights of all people. All the proposals in this omnibus follow this logic of fairness, practicalness, and high standards, following a race and regional equity approach to public safety. It especially follows that logic when it comes to police reform. As I started to mention earlier, Vice Chair Fraser will speak in a minute on this issue. But frankly, I contend to you that this is a quote unquote good cop bill. We appropriate more funds than the other body does, at least $9 million more for vital law enforcement services. We provide for extension of the training fund that's vitally important for our sheriffs and chiefs as they manage their professionals. We provide new resources for updating their policies to meet high quality national standards. We provide new resources for a new body cam program that's heavily steered toward greater Minnesota, where body cams are scarce. We raise salaries for state law enforcement managers. This is also, I would contend, an anti-bad policing bill. We target the state's training funds created after Philando Castillo's killing on the purposes identified at that time: de-escalation training, mental health response, cultural competency, and autism response that we added last year. We condition access to the new body cam funds, not a mandate, but a condition for accessing those funds to a 48-hour family viewing of deadly force and 90-day release to the public, with the ability to delay if an investigation reason is provided in writing. The bill has no knock warrants, but it doesn't eliminate them. It regulates them. The bill has a study on peace officer liability insurance. Every other profession carries this insurance. We want to look at that to see whether that's something the state should be pursuing. A statewide model policy for protecting First Amendment public assembly rights and police practices is also in this bill. Citizen review councils are permitted, not mandated, at the discretion of local control. I know that there are voices in law enforcement who can't find their way to accept these common sense reforms that frankly invites them to be leaders for reform. Perhaps they are afraid of change, perhaps they don't want to lead, but I'm not giving up on them, and this bill doesn't give up on them, and neither should you. Sometimes we need to pull others in the direction that they need to go in order to be the professionals the law requires of them and what the citizens need them to do. I am encouraged that public officials at the highest level of state government, our commissioners of public safety and corrections, are fully backing the police reforms in this bill. I am proud of this bill and of the work of our committee members, many times done in a bipartisan way. I am thankful for the work of our public safety staff, Jamel, Caitlin, John, Ben, Jeff, Ellen, Jen, John, and so many others. Members, I would be terribly remiss if I did not stop to acknowledge this moment that we are in. We are taking up this bill less than 24 hours after the monumental criminal trial verdict of the police officer who murdered George Floyd here in our beloved state. That killing, as you all know, spurred millions of people across our nation and the globe, in big cities and small towns, to come out and assemble to express their pain, their anger, that agents of our government could so callously commit such a horrible violation of human life. That killing, that popular response, the governmental response to that response challenges the very core of our democracy and freedoms. But this isn't new, members. It is only new events that once again offers us a way to do right and to claim our power to come together and build public systems that honors human rights. That's what this bill does. The great American poet Langston Hughes wrote in the 1940s, "Democracy will not come today, this year, nor ever through compromise and fear. I have as much right as the other fellow has to stand on my 2 feet and own the land. I tire so of hearing people say, let things take their course. Tomorrow is another day. I do not need my freedoms when I'm dead. I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. Freedom is a strong seed planted in a great need. I live here too. I want freedom just as you." Members, a part of justice spoke yesterday, but it was only its first word, accountability. It's a good word, whether it applies to regular citizens or to peace officers or to our government systems like our courts, our post board, our jails, and our prisons. But there is more to do, and to do now. There is redemption, opportunity, anti-racism, human decency to be made doable and believable. And this bill doesn't answer all of that. I wish it went further, but it is a good start, whether it's police reform accompanied with police resourcing or securing criminal convictions for sexual assault accompanied with powerfully supporting our victims of sexual assault, or ensuring violators of law do serve their time with earning freedom by equipping themselves to do right while we remove collateral consequences that prevents them from doing right. This bill uses evidence-based practices to shift systems, structures, and narratives in Minnesota to change behavior and to create opportunity. That makes us all safer. In a minute, you will hear from others the diverse provisions in this big bill. The Clean Slate Act, the Healthy Start Act, the Juvenile Justice Reform, Criminal Sexual Conduct Reform, Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Reform in our correction system, policing reform, community empowerment, emergency management, new initiatives. I believe this bill reflects the best of who we are. So don't let our disagreements that we're about to have here over the numerous amendments that are being offered today to sour or take away from the importance of this moment and the duty of the Minnesota House of Representatives to act and to pass a strong public safety, corrections, and judiciary bill that serves every Minnesotan. Madam Speaker, I stand down so that others can then walk through particular provisions of the bill. I believe my colleague, Chair Jamie Becker-Finn, will talk about the judiciary components of this bill.
The representative from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm proud to share more about the provisions in the bill related to judiciary and civil law. First, I do want to thank our staff. We truly have a rock star team, both partisan and nonpartisan, working on our committee. I also want to thank our committee members. We heard a lot of bills and covered a lot of ground during a really challenging year, and I do appreciate all the good work and really true commitment to trying to do the right thing from all the members of our committee. I also want to thank the advocates, the activists, the survivors, and the members of the public who weighed in this year. We don't often thank you, but we should. So keep contacting us, keep holding us accountable. Your voices should be the loudest voices that we hear as legislators, and so I appreciate hearing from all of you. At the heart of this bill is improving access to justice for all Minnesotans. This bill does that by improving access to legal representation and our court systems, expanding protections from discrimination, and taking steps towards decriminalizing poverty. In addition to funding the core operations of our courts, civil legal aid, the Guardian Ad Litem Board, and the Department of Human Rights, this bill does include a few game changers, including reforming civil asset forfeiture. This has been an ongoing debate for many years, and we finally have come to a compromise on this issue with civil asset forfeiture. Reducing the impact of fines and fees on people who are unable to pay them. Increasing the rate of pay for court interpreters, something that has not been done substantially in over 20 years. In addition, we require court-appointed counsel in child protection cases when parents cannot afford a private attorney. It was a conscious decision to not increase court fees for members of the public in this bill in order to pay for all the other good things that are in here. Access to justice absolutely should not depend on a person's income, and our bill makes steps towards addressing that. So in my very first week as a legislator, I received wise advice from Representative Jean Wagenius. She told me that sometimes you're going to have to say things 100 times before anyone will start to hear you. I'm probably only a quarter of the way there, but here it goes. Our state has never truly upheld our duty to provide criminal defense, public defense to our citizens. It is constitutionally required that we do this, yet we treat the Public Defense Board like any other line item in our budget. There are very few things that we are constitutionally required to include in our budget, that we are constitutionally required to fund, and the Public Defense Board is one of those things. We were able to increase the public defense budget by nearly 13% in the next biennium, but we do need to push ourselves to do even better moving forward. Those were several of the provisions in the judiciary section of the bill, but I do want to take a moment to lift up two items that are in the corrections article of the bill that were things that I chief authored and was glad to see included by Chair Mariani. First is the Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Act. This bill fundamentally changes the way we view our correction system. Instead of making it punitive, it allows people to earn early release and supervision abatement, setting them up for success for when they inevitably rejoin our communities, saving our state money, helping to fund victim services, as well as counties, and more funding towards treatment and prevention programs. At its core, this is about moving from measuring success not simply by how much time a person spends in prison, but how they spend their time. In other words, it is a much needed evidence-based reform that will save our state money and set our communities and individuals and families up for success. Finally, as mentioned quickly by Chair Mariani, the Healthy Start Act, it is a simple solution to a profound problem. It allows the Commissioner of Corrections to place women who are pregnant or immediately postpartum in community alternatives such as halfway houses so that they do not have to be separated from their newborn babies. This will allow children to be near their mother and allow these moms to have that much needed time with their newborns. The program truly has the potential to disrupt generations of trauma that have impacted many families, but in particular, we know statistically that current practices are that the current practice of separating babies from their mothers has disproportionately impacted Indigenous women and their babies in our state. And so this is an important reform that we can make in this bill. Again, this bill is focused on justice and equity. Members can be very proud to support this bill. It will positively impact the lives of many, many Minnesotans at a moment in our state's history when true access to justice is critically needed. I will now wrap up. There are other members who will speak more in depth to other provisions within the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The representative from Ramsey, Representative Moran.
All right, good evening, everyone. Madam Speaker and members, I want to thank Chair Mariani, Chair Becker-Finn for their leadership in the area of public safety and judiciary. Today, I stand in support of Senate File 970 to speak specifically on an issue that is important to me as a legislator, but it's also important to me as a mother and a grandmother of Black sons. And so yesterday, with the guilty verdict of Derek Chauvin in the murder of George Floyd, like so many, I felt a sense of relief, a peace, but I lacked the joy. I woke this morning at 4:30 in the morning. And as much as I tried, I could not go back to sleep because I felt, I don't know, an incompleteness. I felt like after the guilty verdict of Derek Chauvin, our lives in this institution went forward yesterday as if nothing had happened here in Minnesota and across the world, as the world watched us. I felt that a shift in police accountability had never happened. And I thought, is that who we are in this body? Do we as lawmakers not acknowledge the inequities of a life being taken by an individual who has been sworn to serve and protect? Is that who we are as lawmakers, as an institution, as a state who has given individuals the right and privilege to serve and protect all the people of Minnesota through their badge and as a law enforcement officer? Do we not talk about it? And I thought we have to, we must, I must. We are lawmakers. And it has been the laws put into practice century ago that has allowed policing in America to remain unjust. Racism is a system, not an individual character flawed or a personal moral failing. It is a system of power that structures opportunity, whether that be education, housing, job, justice. And it assigns value, worthy or being unworthy, full of potential or full of menace, based on the so-called race, the sober interpretation of how we look. We as lawmakers need to know this, and we must understand this. In order to understand public safety and policing in Minnesota, policing in America, it is important to understand the evolution of our systems of policing and public safety. The current state of our policing system and the implication of mass incarceration are related to policy decisions that developed with the enactment of the 13th Amendment of the Constitution and the aftermath of the Emancipation Proclamation. The 13th Amendment, while creating the framework for the abolishment of racial slavery, also built in an extraordinary constitutional exception for enslavement for citizens. It created a pipeline for Black convicts. States created policies known as Black codes. States lawmakers created policies known as Black codes. Under Black codes, many states require Black people to sign yearly labor contracts. If they refuse, they risk being arrested, fined, and forced into unpaid labor, which all happened. One of the early forms of policing was the system of slave patrols, where armed white men were organized to monitor and enforce discipline on enslaved Black people. Black codes dictated much of the lives of African Americans. The codes kept Black in servitude to their white masters. Let me say that again. The codes kept Blacks in servitude to their white master. I can't even fathom as a child, let alone a grown man or woman, calling a person their master. While the ratification of the 14th Amendment in 1868 quickly made the Black codes illegal by giving formerly enslaved Black people equal protection of laws through the Constitution, other unequal policies followed. Jim Crow laws were introduced and aimed at subjugating African Americans and in denying them their civil rights. Jim Crow laws were enacted across southern and some northern states, even here in Minnesota, replacing the Black codes. For over 80 years, Jim Crow laws mandated separate public spaces for Blacks and whites, such as schools, libraries, water fountains, and restaurants. And enforcing them was part of, guess what? Was part of the police job. Blacks who broke laws or violated social norms often endured police brutality. Meanwhile, the authorities, police officers, often did not punish the perpetrators when African Americans were lynched, nor did the judicial system hold the police accountable for failing to intervene when Black people were being murdered by mobs. This form of mob violence was not isolated in the South, as it also occurred in Minnesota. To understand the inequities that we see in policing today, we must understand that the legally sanctioned systemic racism of decades and centuries ago are still embedded in policies and practices today. There's a legacy of public policy decisions that serve to reinforce inequality in our justice system and a legacy of resistance to advance in civil rights. For centuries, systemic racism has contributed to stark and persistent racial inequities in public safety. These inequities can be traced back to government sanctioned laws and policies that have created a system built on racial inequality where inequities is entrenched in our systems. We need Senate File 970. This is an opportunity for us as lawmakers in this body to move our state forward and not be beholden to the past public policy that allow unequal treatment of Black men, women, boys, and girls. Government sanctioned racial discrimination created these inequities, and only racially conscious policies can address the inequities we see in policing today. There is no time to be colorblind. When an unarmed Black man, woman, boy, or girl is killed by police, it is important that we stop saying or thinking in our heads, well, if they would have just followed the rules and complied, this wouldn't happen. Not true. Many would have thought that about George Floyd had not we seen the video, because that officer, Officer Chavez, who is now being convicted of murder of George Floyd, when he finally got up off his neck, once he was absolutely sure he was dead, he went on to file a report that said George was resisting arrest and he died from natural causes. This is all about color and race. We know this. We know this because just on April the 11th, Dante White, a 20-year-old Black young man, was shot by a police officer and killed. An unarmed Black man. And then on April the 19th, Luke, I'm gonna mess up his name, but Luke Oakland Bronze assaulted a police officer. One thing happened on April 11th, the other on April the 19th. And this is what happened. Luke, who is a 61-year-old Hutchinson, Minnesota man, was arrested after he allegedly assaulted an employee at a Menards in McLeod County City during a dispute over wearing a mask. Then he attacked a police officer. And this is what happened. The man left the store and was soon spotted by a police officer in the parking lot of a nearby Walmart. When the officer tried to stop his vehicle, the man led him in what was described as a slow speed pursuit in the area of the Hutchinson Mall. The vehicle soon stopped. When the officer tried to engage the suspect through the driver's side window, the suspect took off at a high rate of speed, where the officer trapped and hanging from the window. During the struggle, the suspect hit the officer in the head with a hammer. The officer is hospitalized in stable condition, and the suspect was arrested for assault and fleeing the police. Versus Dante Wright, who was pulled over for an expired tap and an air freshener on the rear view mirror, who got back into his car. Trauma is real. Historical trauma is real. Who got back into his car while being arrested. He was unarmed. He did not attack a police officer. He was murdered by police. Yesterday, we watched the system of accountability play out in the murder of George Floyd, who was a father, a son, a brother, an uncle, who was loved, who was human. Each year that goes by without addressing policing in Minnesota and policing in America, systemic racism will allow Black, brown, and communities of color to encounter police officers disproportionately. Just like historical trauma is passed down from generation to generation, so does the thought process of white individuals seeing Black individuals as perpetrators, as bad, as less than humane. In 2020, the legislature took a first step in moving police accountability bills into law with essential language revision around the use of force. And yes, there is more work that needs to happen. We have extended officers getting the training that they need that is within this bill. And we must continue to do this work as a legislative body. This is our time at this moment to continue to have to surround ourselves of the policies of the past that are still actively viable today. It is imperative on the Minnesota legislature, on lawmakers, on us, to recognize it was race-based laws that got us to where we are today. And again, it's going to take race-based laws to move us forward as a state. We as policymakers have the opportunity to create and design a police system that holds bad cops accountable. You don't hate cops. My 10-year-old son wanted to be a cop, and every Saturday morning, at the age of 10, he wanted to be a cop. And every Saturday morning, I would get up and take him down in St. Paul on Albert Street to be a police cadet. I did it for years because he saw the value in doing that. But by the time he was 14, he was saying to me, I don't want to be a police officer. And instead, he focused on business. But we as policymakers have the opportunity to create and design a police system that holds bad cops accountable, who make the system of policing look bad, Bad cops make the system of policing look bad, and it allow cops to abuse the system that they have been given the right and privilege to serve in. Senate File 970 builds upon the Minnesota Police Accountability Act. It invests in community-centered public safety. It includes common sense juvenile justice reform. It decriminalizes poverty. It addresses current discriminatory practices and so much more. Members, George Floyd, Dante White, Philando Castile, all from Minnesota, were someone's son, brother, uncle, friend, and loved one. Their lives matter. The sanctity of life needs to matter here in this state for Black lives. There is nothing we can do to bring them back. Some say there's nothing we can do. I reject that, lawmakers in this body. We have the ability, we have the power, and we just need to recognize the inequity, the racism within our public safety system, and create new laws and policy and practice that hold bad cops accountable for their bad actions. We can do this together. We can do this together with communities. We can do this together with those who've been impacted most by the system. We can do this with police officers. And we must do this. We cannot allow bad cops to make the system of policing distrustful, because that is where we are today. We need police accountability, and we need a justice system that works for all. I just ask members, Madam Speaker and member, I ask you to please join me in supporting Senate File 970. Thank you.
The representative from Hennepin, Representative Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, thank you, Chair Moran, for sharing that background, that history. I always think it's important that we get grounded in a way up to where we are right now, so I appreciate that. First, I want to start by thanking Chair Mariani for his leadership and thoughtful demeanor, his wisdom, and steady hand, and for leading our committee with a moral purpose focused on creating a Minnesota that is safe for all Minnesotans, especially those in our BIPOC communities. I also want to thank Lead Johnson and other committee members for robust and sometimes tense debates that were had during committee hearings. These conversations were and still are necessary for us to move forward to create a public safety system that includes police accountability. Last but absolutely not least, the staff that has made this work possible, Jamil Lundy, Ella McDaniels, and Caitlin Ogunfolame. Members, it's been over 24 hours since we received the verdict that held former Officer Chauvin accountable for the murder of George Floyd. After there was a collective exhale from the Black and brown communities that have felt devalued and disrespected for far too long, shortly after that, we saw images from around the world of communities celebrating. However, even in their jubilation, community understood that the very fact that we had a trial is proof of our failing here at the legislature. They understood that before we had a guilty verdict, we had a guilty system. Except for some substantial but insufficient changes from last year, we still have the same system that killed George Floyd. The death of Dante Wright should have made that clear. Unfortunately, we still have the same inaction by those who uphold the status quo. We still have the same community with the same doubts in our ability to care about them and our system's ability to deliver justice. We have the same doubts in a just verdict, even by knowledgeable governmental officials who were preparing for the worst. In a case where the facts were clear and compelling, which is a recognition that within our legal framework, that we still have the same odds stacked against judicial accountability. So while this verdict told our car to accountability, it does not change the fact that the car was broken in the first place. This bill was a step towards changing this. Now, early in the session, we held a week of hearings on Greater Minnesota where we heard that issues of police brutality, crime, racism, and addiction aren't confined to the metro area. That these issues are challenges we all share. Unfortunately, they are also challenges only some seek to address. This bill addresses statewide issues. Before I close, I have to highlight the opposition that has been faced and continues to be a barrier to implementing the type of change Minnesotans are calling for. We have faced consistent opposition from lobbying groups representing our police chiefs, our sheriffs, and our rank and file officers. Most recently, they rejected this omnibus bill in a written letter. I will not read that letter because it does include some disinformation, but I will read the closing paragraph of the letter because I believe it highlights the disconnect that we have between rhetoric and action. And I quote, "In the end, we want to improve trust between citizens and law enforcement, decrease the number of deadly encounters with peace officers, fund important public safety needs of agencies across the state, and ensure our officers in Minnesota are some of the best trained in the country." Very, very lofty goals. But this statement rings hollow because these lobbying groups have not supported any of the bills that would help them achieve the goals stated in that paragraph. Bills that are included in this omnibus package. Minnesota law enforcement who put their lives on the line deserve better than politicized associations who write letters filled with untruths, showing that their seasoned lobbyists either are unable to understand our legislation or worse, they would rather not tell the truth than engage in a productive conversation aimed at coming up with solutions to the problems we are facing. Here are a few bills that will actually achieve their goals. However, they have not supported these bills. But these bills would allow municipalities to establish civilian review boards, authored by Representative Gomez. This would provide for increased accountability. Regulation on no-knock warrants, authored by Representative Hollins. This would minimize interactions that could lead to deadly encounters. Puts a prohibition on white supremacy. This could lead to community trust. Also, collect personnel data for early warning system. This will lead to better training and intervention. Limit non-moving violation traffic stops. This bill was developed collectively with Chair Becker-Finn and Rep. Moeller. This would limit interactions that could lead to deadly encounters, as in Dante Wright's case. This bill also provides funding for body cameras. This will provide needed resources to our officers around the state and help improve accountability. This bill creates a mental health crisis teams to respond to 911 calls, authored by Reps. Hansen. This will limit interactions that could lead to deadly encounters. And we have a bill that requires a peace officer with the duty to report excessive force incidents to their chief law enforcement officer. This bill was authored by Representative Lucero. This would also help with accountability and build trust. Members, I want you to understand that the verdict from yesterday does not change the sense of urgency that we must have. We cannot assert that we have done enough with the reform that was passed in the summer of 2020. Dante Wright and his family would not agree with that assertion. The thousands of community members that have wrapped their arms around George Floyd's family and Dante Wright's family would not agree with that assertion. The daughter of George Floyd and the son of Dante Wright would not agree with that assertion. Their fathers should be here to help raise them, to love them, to see them grow. We need to do everything we can to ensure that we disrupt the status quo. We must disrupt the system that has not shown that Black Lives Matter. Members, the world is still watching, and we must rise to meet this moment. And members, I believe we can do that, and I look forward to the debate on this bill. Thank you.
The representative from Ramsey, Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So many of you know about the sexual assault bill that's included in this omnibus bill because you have signed on to support it in large numbers after the Supreme Court's decision highlighted major shortcomings in our law for intoxicated victims. This bill is based on the recommendations of the legislatively created Sexual Assault Working Group. This group, which included many stakeholders, recommended closing the loophole for voluntary intoxication cases. This loophole in the law dates back to the 1880s when women were considered property. The working group also recommended the creation of a crime of sexual extortion, providing more protections for 13-year-old victims of sexual assault, and additional important changes. I'm really grateful to the members of the working group Chairs Mariani and Becker-Finn for their commitment to justice for survivors, and to Representative O'Neill for all her help with this bill and fierce advocacy for survivors. Most importantly, though, I'm thankful for and in awe of the survivors who have continued to share their traumatic experiences with the goal of justice for other survivors. They do this knowing that our changes in the law won't impact their cases where the system failed them, but they do so in order to make things better for others. Another aspect of this bill was the result of the courage and advocacy of survivors of sexual assault who are members of the National Guard. This bill requires the BCA to investigate the cases involving assaults by and against Guard members. Finally, I'd like to highlight the civil asset forfeiture reform in this bill. This compromise language was the result of lengthy stakeholder discussions that began 2 years ago. This was a diverse group of stakeholders, including the ACLU and Americans for Prosperity, prosecutors, and defense attorneys. I'm really proud of the work they did to reform our forfeiture laws to better safeguard civil liberties for Minnesotans, and thankful forfeiture reform is included in Senate File 970. I'm really looking forward to the debate tonight and voting on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The representative from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Attorney General Ellison yesterday said, "True justice is not one case, it is a societal transformation." We have a long path to achieve equality under the law and to restore community trust in our policing, but I believe this bill takes important steps towards that transformation that we need to achieve. I'm going to speak briefly to 3 of the provisions in the bill that I think would do that. First is the Clean Slate Act. 1 in 4 Minnesotans have some type of criminal record. 90% of employers and 80% of landlords conduct background checks. I have heard moving stories from constituents who have long since completed their terms of their sentence, but are still finding difficulty with getting housing, with getting employment, and who are being held back by the existence of a criminal record. The Clean Slate Act would automatically expunge records for certain low-level offenses, building on bipartisan efforts we've seen in states like Utah, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. It's supported by the Minnesota County Attorneys, the Minneapolis Chamber, and conservative groups like Americans for Prosperity. Senator Chamberlain is the Senate author. The Bipartisan Clean Slate Act stands for a simple premise that we should give those who have served their time an opportunity for redemption. The second provision I'd like to speak to are the jail reform provisions. Every incarcerated person deserves the ability to receive appropriate health care and safe conditions, but unfortunately we know that's not the case in Minnesota today. Thanks to investigative reporting like Care 11's Cruel and Unusual series, we've heard the heartbreaking stories of the conditions in some of our jails. Tragically, some have died while in custody, over 50 since 2015. This bill would update minimum standards for licensed facilities and ensure accountability for violations. The third provision I'd like to speak to is the jailhouse informant provision. None of us want to see innocent people punished for crimes they did not commit. And one source of information that may not always be credible is jailhouse informants, where there's an incentive to trade information for leniency. This bill would improve the disclosure of past informant behavior to defense counsel to allow for credibility to be better determined by a court. And it would create a database to track informant behavior to better analyze trends. Senator Ingebrigtsen is the Senate author of this provision. So members, I think we have some really strong bipartisan provisions in this bill that will help us achieve that societal transformation that we know is necessary, and I look forward to tonight's debate.
The representative from Ramsey, Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to state that this bill was crafted with the belief and understanding that we can come to a bipartisan solution to address aspects of public safety, from feeling secure in our homes and neighborhoods, to our search for justice in the legal system, to our goals of rehabilitation for people who are re-entering our communities. Your own home should be the place where you feel safest. It's where we go after a day's work to relax and where we tuck our children into bed. And it's also where we're most vulnerable. I think we can all agree that the sanctity of home is paramount. Our language regulating no-knock warrants is an effort to protect that sanctity while balancing the law enforcement's occasional need to move with the element of surprise. We know that no-knock warrants disproportionately are used in Black and brown neighborhoods and often have devastating results. Data shows that no-knock warrants are dangerous to citizens and law enforcement officials alike. They've led to nearly 100 deaths in a 6-year span. And even in situations where citizens don't die, they often suffer trauma from the experience of having their refuge, their home, wantonly invaded. Short of banning no-knock warrants, our legislation simply seeks to better regulate and track this controversial law enforcement tool. And this is because we're truly seeking to support the needs of our law enforcement officials. But we want to ensure that these are truly needs and not merely conveniences. I also appreciate the inclusion of my modest provision on reforming probation and revocation. In general, Republicans and Democrats see probation as being a net positive. We know that correctional treatment is better provided through community resources than through confinement, and it's also significantly cheaper than incarceration. Currently, people under probation supervision can be incarcerated for non-criminal technical violations, like not contacting their probation agent or violating a curfew. This bill takes a step towards ensuring that people in probation are not sent to prison for their first technical violation unless there's evidence that allowing that person to remain free would present a risk to public safety. This provision would help ensure that instead of sending low-risk offenders to prison, that we allow them the chance to remain in the community, keeping family structures together, making workers available to the workforce, and allowing offenders to be rehabilitated, which I would argue is the goal of our criminal justice system, to rehabilitate people who commit crimes and to restore crime victims. In closing, I would like you to consider the following quotes. Public trust is essential to public safety. It's essential. This bill moves us closer to rebuilding that trust, not just in police, because public safety goes well beyond policing. This bill helps us rebuild trust in the law enforcement, in the Department of Corrections, in the judicial system, in child protection, and in alternatives to police, like social workers and mental health professionals. Because honestly, right now that trust is broken. We need public safety and judicial system that's equitable and that works for all Minnesotans. And for that reason, I hope that you'll support this bill. I look forward to the debate tonight. Thank you very much.
The representative from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, it is an honor to join Chair Mariani and our entire community safety and justice reform team to present the different aspects of this terrific bill. I will save broader remarks for later, but for now I have the opportunity to describe for you just a few of the aspects of this bill that protect and lift up young people in our community. So first, the bill prohibits the use of strip searches when when children are held in custody. We can keep facilities safe and secure without having adolescents be stripped naked and inspected, and so this prohibits that practice. This prohibits the use of isolation, of solitary confinement as a disciplinary measure. There's no reason that children should experience the debilitating effects of isolation as a penalty or as a sanction. We also, in this bill, eliminate the use of shackling of young people during court proceedings, and we take steps to provide for greater privacy during juvenile court proceedings. We require that practitioners use an objective risk assessment tool when determining whether or not a child should remain detained and away from their parent or guardian. We require the greater use of alternatives to detention, which I think we all should be supporting, of course. And we prohibit having children aged 12 or under being placed in secure detention for delinquency. We direct these children to the child protection system. Now, these proposals all come from bills championed by Representative Long, by Representative Edelson, by me, and with the support of our GOP colleagues, Representative Poston and Novotny, many, many others. These are evidence-based reforms, members, that ensure that youth who come into contact with the justice system ensure that they, maybe perhaps because of past trauma, are not further traumatized. But members, that is not it. We also lift up and protect young people through a number of steps to address exploitation and trafficking. I do this work a lot as a prosecutor outside the legislature in fighting these crimes. 6 years ago, in my first term, we established grants to investigate these kinds of crimes. Well, this bill expands the task forces that are doing those investigations. It provides for greater coordination and support. And it also includes statutory changes to better hold exploiters accountable. The bill also contains a proposal from Representative Mueller to require the development and use of a model policy for the investigation of these cases. Members, just in this one area alone, there are powerful reforms in this bill, and we'll be happy to have some more discussion and eventually a vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The representative from Dakota, Representative Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too want to thank the chair for such a interesting experience on committee this year, being my first time on public safety, and definitely some robust discussions with both sides of the aisle. I want to draw our attention to 2 points in this bill that are very important to my own personal life. Firefighters have been at the front lines during the pandemic. They haven't been able to work from home. They continue to respond to calls despite the risk to themselves. For these reasons, as well as enhanced risk to these men and women that face this during the pandemic and face other hazards during this, they rush into buildings. Today in Minneapolis alone, we had a 4-alarm fire that was full of carcinetics that basically put these firefighters at risk. Representative Joachim put together the Hometown Heroes Bill, which is in this bill, which will help 20,000 firefighters across the state, providing financial assistance to firefighters who are diagnosed with cancer or heart disease. Many firefighters face chronic illness or worse throughout their career in retirement, and this bill recognizes these risks associated with the career. It also provides resources to firefighters to seek trauma-related counseling and training and education around cancer, heart disease, and suicide prevention. This bill also invests $3 million per year in emergency management grants around our communities and around our state. Doesn't matter where these disasters happen. They can happen from Wells to International Falls to my own community. Now we're funding these to make sure that they have the funds they need at $3 million a year. It also provides $500,000 statewide for critical incident stress management services for first responders to address the ongoing trauma experience while on the job, as well as promote officer wellness. This is a real big thing. This came out in my own career as when people, we see things that no one else sees as first responders, police officers, firefighters, EMS. And it's so important that they do seek help. They're usually the ones that turn away from it and walk away. But now we're encouraging them to get the help they need. So members, I look forward to a great debate tonight, and let's see where we can take this, because it would be great to see a green vote. Thank you.
The representative from Ramsey, Representative Herr.
Mr. Speaker, members, I rise today in support of the Public Safety and Judiciary Omnibus Bill. This is my second term on the Judiciary Finance and Policy Committee, and I can't express how honored I am to serve under Chair Becker-Finn. She was thorough, inclusive, collaborative, and thoughtful. And though I did not serve on the Public Safety Committee, I worked closely with Chair Mariani on a range of public safety issues. I appreciate both chairs and their committees for including provisions that are long overdue. There are 3 that I'd like to specifically speak to. The first is income discrimination in housing. It specifies the potential tenants or home buyers cannot be discriminated against based on the fact that they receive public assistance. This is already law in 17 states and over 90 localities nationwide. I look forward to Minnesota joining these states and localities. The second is pay discrimination, which prohibits employers from asking for the pay history of an applicant who is applying for a job, if the purpose of the request is to determine wage or salary for that applicant. 18 states that have already ended the use of the pay history question. States that have implemented pay history question bans saw an 8% increase in pay for women and 13% increase in pay for Black workers. We must follow suit if we want equity in pay. The third is the hate crime bill. This bill improves reporting of crimes motivated by bias by creating more avenues for victims of hate crimes to report. It appropriates funds to the Minnesota Department of Human Rights to collect and compile data on crimes motivated by bias. Increasing training and reporting requirements for law enforcement. It also focuses on that, and it modifies crimes related to damage to property. With state and national data showing an increase in bias and hate-related incidents, this bill allows Minnesota to begin tackling this issue. I am proud of this bill. the work put into by staff and members, and the values that ground it. I ask for member support today, and I look forward to the conversation on the Public Safety and Judiciary Omnibus. Thank you.
There are amendments at the desk. Well, there are many amendments at the desk. The first amendment, the clerk will report the amendment.
Mariani moves to amend Senate File Number 970, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A33.
I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Mariani. Would you please explain the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Speaker and members, this is a pretty simple amendment. It basically contains only technical changes in 3 areas. There's clarifying language to the forfeiture provisions in the bill. This was Representative Muller's bill. There's also some clarifying language in the minor non-moving violations provision in the bill. And then finally, there's a small technical grammatical change incorporated into the sexual assault provision. And basically that lines up language with the other body.
Further discussion to the A33 amendment. Further discussion. There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the A33 amendment say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Mueller moves to amend Senate File Number 970, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A19.
I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Mueller. Will you please explain the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The A19 provides some clarifying language to the provisions of this bill related to DWIs. The DWI bill contains the recommendation of the DWI task force and has broad stakeholder support, such as county attorneys, defense attorneys, law enforcement, and Mothers Against Drunk Driving. It also has bipartisan support, and I'd like to thank Representative Baker for his work on this bill. One of the main features of the bill is to eliminate special registration plates, also known as whiskey plates, for those enrolled in ignition interlock, because interlock actually makes the road safer. And the A19 amendment clarifies what happens if the person violates ignition interlock, and then special registration plates would be utilized. Please vote yes on this amendment, members. Thank you.
The representative from Candy, Ohio, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just wanted to also echo Representative Muller's work on this bill. We've been working on this for about 2 years, and again, a guy that has learned the hard way what addiction is, and it's a real disease. And folks, I think that we have come a long way in Minnesota when someone makes a mistake, and we don't need to publicly shame them any longer with what we all know as kind of the whiskey plate. It doesn't make our roads any safer. It humiliates members of people's family that actually did nothing wrong. This bill tries to encourage more people to actually get involved with the interlock system, which the technology is really pretty good. It's not perfect, and there's some other good amendments here that actually make it better for the manufacturer of the devices to make sure that if something does go wrong, the cost will be taken care of by other than the driver. But again, I just want to thank Representative Mueller for this. I think this is a really good bill. Lots of support with folks with the DWI task force, MAD, a lot of good organizations got behind this. So thank you, Representative Mueller, for your great work on this, and I do also support this.
Further discussion to the A19 amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of the A19 amendment say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Grosso moves to amend Senate File Number 970, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A2.
I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Grosso. Will you please explain the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, members, for this time. The A2 amendment replaces the $6 million per year grants to community activists and gives it to violent crime enforcement teams. also known as VSETs. The grants are to be used to combat drug trafficking, human trafficking, gang violence, and carjackings. VSETs is a state and federally funded program authorized under Minnesota statutes to provide funding and guidance for the operation of multi-jurisdictional task forces that address narcotics, gangs, and related violent crimes. Now, a little history about myself. I served on one of these task forces. We worked a multi-jurisdictional area, multi-counties, and 3 reservations in the northern part of the state. These task forces, that task force, had a great impact on making all of the communities in the counties and in the tribal communities safer places for the good citizens. The goal is to increase the identification and arrest of serious law violators and enhance the amount of law enforcement expertise available statewide for complex investigations that cross jurisdictional boundaries. There are currently 21 funded task forces that span 20 counties. The task forces are staffed by more than 200 investigators from 120 agencies. These are all good men and women in uniform that are going out there every day and putting their lives on the line to try to make our communities safer. Task forces work alongside the Minnesota BCA specialized task forces, like the Human Trafficking Task Force, and the federal agencies. These are the experts we should entrust with our taxpayers' dollars to keep people safe in their communities and get violent criminals off the streets. Members, I ask for your support and I request a roll call, Mr. Speaker.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Grossell. Representative Mariani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Grossell, for bringing forth an important provision. VSETs do play often a very effective role in our state for the reasons that, for the areas that you talked about, and does that through highly needed coordination among our local law enforcement entities. I don't think anyone here is going to argue that we shouldn't have that kind of work. The issue with your amendment, however, is that it, assumes that VSETs are not currently being funded, through this bill and through the ongoing work and appropriations, rather, of the legislature. In fact, they are. The other issue is that your amendment basically takes out another tool that we're adding to the toolkit to keep our communities safe. Just as we need law enforcement to be involved in the kind of work that you identified and that you participated in, we heard some good testimony from a couple of task forces this year. We also need work from our community-based organizations, particularly those communities that are left out of a lot of decision-making, tend to be lower income communities, tend to be communities from communities of color. There's some very specific direction in the language here that really has the government, the state, through its appropriation process, bring in those communities who can play a critical role on the ground of identifying where issues are at, of doing strong intervention work so we don't even need to get to the level of VSET work. It's just valuable work. If we weren't funding VSETs, then, I suppose one could argue, we ought to take it from this new type of work and make sure we keep doing this work. But in fact, this bill, as I mentioned at the very beginning, provides a very balanced approach to our public safety and corrections work with a strong community-centered value. And in that value, law enforcement as well as community groups have important roles to play. There are other parts of this bill where we also address human trafficking, which is an incredible scourge and destructive presence in our state. We don't just do that through VSET work. We do it in other areas as well as drug interdiction and treatment and prevention efforts. So in many ways, Representative Grasso, well-intended, no doubt, but you're disrupting an important balance in this bill and basically sending the same message that the state has always sent to communities and citizens who really want to play a role in keeping their communities, their neighborhoods, and their families safe, that no, you have no function here. Let's all do it, with this one size fits all. And so members, I would urge you to vote down the A2 amendment.
The representative from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to note for Representative Grasso and the members, this proposal would have the violent crime enforcement teams, or VSETs, investigate human trafficking cases. I mentioned the grants that were created a number of years ago. This bill invests in them. At the time, we asked the VSETs, is this a good fit for you? We thought that would make sense. And we're specifically told that no, it is not a good fit. It's a very different skill set, handling drug and gun investigations and human trafficking. And I say this just to note, we already in our state, members, spend 4 times as much money investigating the trafficking of drugs and guns as the trafficking of human beings. Chair Mariani's bill, the bill that we are reviewing tonight, redresses that by investing in investigations of human trafficking already through the task forces set up for that. This is a bad fit for the VSETs, and it would be bad to take the money away from the other account, as Chair Mariani said. I support him in urging a no vote.
Further discussion to the A2 amendment. Further discussion to the A2 amendment.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Representative Grasso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Chair Mariani, and thank you, Representative Pinto. In case you haven't checked on some of these statistics, the increase in violent crimes, homicides, that the crime scene investigation team for the Minnesota BCA between 2019 and 2020, there's an increase of 87.3%, and their team being called out. 87.3% in violent crimes, and that's just in the area that the St. Paul office covers. The Bemidji office saw an increase of 38.9% of call-outs for the crime scene investigations. You had 83 homicides in the city of Minneapolis alone, and a large percentage of them, of the victims, were from the BIPOC community. And this year, you have 21 homicides. And every one of them is from the BIPOC community, these victims. These teams have the resources. If they have the proper resources, they can go in and they can help these communities, help these areas, to bring these people who commit these heinous crimes, these homicides, to justice. I encourage a green vote on this amendment, members.
Seeing no further discussion to the A2 amendment, the clerk will take the roll. Members voting remotely, please vote. Will the clerk call the names of those members who have not yet voted?
Bo.
Bo, aye.
Bo, aye. Driscoski.
Driscoski, aye.
Driscoski, aye. Garofalo.
Garofalo, aye.
Garofalo, aye. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, aye.
Gruenhagen, aye. Hamilton.
Hamilton, aye.
Hamilton, aye. Houseman.
Houseman, no.
Houseman, no. Heinrich.
Heinrich, aye.
Heinrich, aye. Igo.
Igo, aye.
Igo, aye. Keel. Keel, aye. Kosnick.
Excuse you, Joe. Cosmic, aye.
Kosnick, aye. Lee.
Lee, no.
Lee, no. Listagard. Listagard, no. Markwart.
Markwart, no.
Markwart, no. Mason.
Mason, no.
Mason, no. McDonald.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald, aye. Nelson, N.
Nelson, N, aye.
Nelson, N, aye. O'Driscoll.
O'Driscoll, aye.
O'Driscoll, aye. Pearson.
Pearson, aye.
Pearson, aye. Stevenson.
Stephenson, no.
Stevenson, no. Swazinski.
Swazinski, aye.
Swazinski, aye. Thompson.
Thompson, no.
Thompson, no. West.
West, aye.
West, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 64 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Poston moves to amend Senate File Number 970, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A3.
I recognize the author of the amendment. Representative Poston, will you please explain the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The A3 amendment takes $5 million a year in grants away from community activist organizations and redirects it towards physical security audits for our public schools, grants for our public schools, I should say. When we send our kids back to school, whenever that is, we want to make sure that they go back to safe schools. And these audits, I think, are the least that we can do. The amendment gives grants to schools to have professional audits conducted. The audits have to be conducted by a certified auditor, someone that is certified by the American Society of Industrial Security. We all know in this world that we're living in today that there's a lot more mental health issues in our children than ever before. And soon, I hope our kids will all be back in school. And I pray every day that we don't have another one of these mass shootings at a school come up. So I think school audits are very important. I've served on public safety for 3 years. And one of the things that we have not done is had a committee meeting dedicated to school safety. I think we're missing the mark by not doing that. I was glad to hear Representative Pinto talk about some of the things that we're doing for our children. Very proud of those initiatives that he mentioned. I'm a co-chair with Representative Long on the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus. Some of you probably don't even know that that exists, but we meet every week, both sides of the aisle, and both bodies actually, the House and the Senate. And we talk about issues. And one of the issues we agreed upon early in our process was that kids are right on the top of the priority list. And you've heard that a couple of times already tonight, that kids are on the top of our priority list. I think our kids are our priority. I think school safety should be our priority. I think that this amendment is the least we could do right now to make our schools safe. And I'm hoping that Chair Mariani, we can have some informational, perhaps meetings to talk about school safety going forward. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a roll call, and members, I would ask for your support.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Mariani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd ask you respectfully to vote down the A3 amendment. I think Representative Poston probably misspoke. We actually had an entire day 2 years ago on school safety and school shooting issues. Representative Christensen, who was at our committee, successfully passed the School Safety Center account, which we fully fund in this bill. And so pretty much the same arguments with the other committee in terms of taking from one to do for another. We're actually doing both. And so members, I would respectfully urge your no vote on the A3 amendment.
Further discussion to the A3 amendment.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Poston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chair Mariani, I've been advocating for 2 years to have a school safety committee meeting. I advocated as a short time ago, actually just a week or so ago. And I also left a phone message asking you to call me so we could have a discussion about it, and I haven't heard back from you. These are our kids. We need to make sure that they're safe. And in this world that we're living in right now, I'm very concerned, and I believe you probably are too, about safety in our schools. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. Will the clerk call the names of those members who have not yet voted?
Berg. Berg. Bo.
Bo, aye.
Bo, aye. Drazkowski.
Drazkowski, aye.
Drazkowski, aye. Garofalo.
Garofalo, aye.
Garofalo, aye. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, aye.
Gruenhagen, aye. Hamilton.
Hamilton, aye.
Hamilton, aye. Hausman.
Hausman, no.
Hausman, no. Heinrich.
Heinrich, aye.
Heinrich, aye. Lee.
Lee, no.
Lee, no. Lissegard. Lissegard, no. Mason.
Mason, no.
Mason, no. McDonald.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald, aye. Nelson, N.
Nelson, N, aye.
Nelson, N, aye. Swazinski.
Swazinski, aye.
Swazinski, aye. Thompson.
Thompson, no.
Thompson, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 63 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted.